Chapter 2754. The dozen or so guards were also stunned at this moment. They turned their heads in unison and looked at Yin Jun Fei, whose neck was being strangled. There was no expression on their faces, but they didn't continue to attack. They lined up in a row, facing Yi Qing Luo's direction. They were like a dozen puppets, waiting for the final order. Yin Jun Fei was so frightened by Yi Qing Luo that her entire body was trembling. A suffocating pain came from her neck, causing her to be filled with the desire to live. Save me. Save me. 10 overguards stood at their original spots. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes as her gaze swept past those expressionless faces in front of her. A guess in the bottom of her heart slowly formed. She pursed her lips and moved her fingers slightly on Yin Junfei's neck. Following that, her lips curled as a bloodthirsty smile appeared in her eyes. She lowered her head and leaned close to Yin Junfei's ear as she whispered softly, "Looks like, as an envoy, you're a failure. You're spouting rubbish." Yin Junfei retorted with difficulty, "I'm the envoy of the Palace of Darkness. You kill me. If you kill me, they will not let you off." Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she was interested. "Then, why don't we try? Just nice. She could try her guess." Yi Qing Luo grabbed Yin Junfei's neck as she raised her eyes and smiled at the row of guards in front of her. "You people from the Palace of Darkness are merely so. You've been spreading it so mysteriously, even saying that you want to surpass the Imperial Palace. From what I see, you're not even half of the Imperial Palace." There was a hint of laughter at her voice. Following that, she tilted her head and blinked her long eyelashes as she gave an innocent smile. "Originally, on account that we're old acquaintances. Plus today, it's the Miao tribe's Sainus' selection ceremony. I didn't intend to disgrace you. Such a pity." She intentionally paused for a moment. Her voice was mixed with a treacherous chill. "If you don't do it, you won't die. Since Envoy Yin loves to do it, then I'll fulfill your wish. Let you and your Palace of Darkness scram from heaven to hell." Yi Qing Luo didn't intentionally control her volume for the first few sentences. He lowered his voice when he said the last sentence. The cold and deep voice was like a deadly lock, seeping into Yin Junfei's heart bit by bit. Almost reflexively, Yin Junfei screamed out, her face pale. The surrounding guests were in an uproar again. Could it be that Envoy Yin and Yi Luo were old acquaintances? An old acquaintance? Emissary Yin was from the upper realm. In other words, this Yi Luo was also from the upper realm. No wonder he had such a high cultivation at such a young age. Only those godlike people from the upper realm could be so perverted. After knowing that Yi Luo was from the 3 upper realms, everyone's attitude immediately changed. Yi Luo was right. From the beginning to the end, it was Yin Fei who used the power of the Palace of Darkness to show off and threaten Elder Miao, forcing Yi Luo and the others, who were sitting in the first row, to move to the last row. If not for Yin Fei's provocation, Yin Fei would not have been kicked to the bench and ended up in this situation. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't die. The new image was very appropriate. Yi Luo, squatting by the side, the pale-faced Sun Yutong grabbed Mei's robes in fear. Chapter 2755. All right, it's not impossible to let her go. Yi Qing Luo replied straightforwardly as her brows were filled with smiles. She raised her brows, and the long arc at the corner of her eyes made her look rather evil. Sun Yutong was stunned, as she didn't expect Yi Qing Luo to be so easygoing. What do you want to do?" Yi Qing Luo only smiled as she lowered her eyes to look at Yin Junfei, who was wearing a veil, but it was unable to conceal her pale face as she asked with a smile, "Does Messenger Yin want to live?" Yes, she naturally wanted to live. Who didn't want to live? She had put in so much effort in order to live on, even to the extent of betraying her everything. How could she possibly not want to live? But Yin Junfei was very clear. Yi Qing Luo would not let her live. At least, she wouldn't let her live easily, no matter how anxious she was. Yin Junfei finally opened her eyes wide as she tried her best to look at her calmly. "Your motive. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows as she looked at the direction of those guards. Order them to leave the Miao tribe. Yin Zhenfei's eyes flashed as her body shuddered slightly. She bit her lips tightly. No. Oh. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as she smiled. As she smiled, her slender fingers tightened. Yi Qing Luo was smiling. Her smile was gentle and her eyes were calm. Totally not like someone who was using her hands to kill someone. But from Yin Zhenfei's struggling strength and that voice which could no longer speak, it had all been verified. Yi Qing Luo really wanted to kill Yin Zhenfei. No, no. Sun Yutong instantly panicked. The Misty Palace's messenger was her only reliance now. If Yin Zhenfei died, who would bear the Misty Palace's anger? Yi Luo? No. Yi Luo was not only the person beside her, he was respected and powerful. Yi Luo herself was so powerful that no one could fathom her strength. Misty Palace would definitely take it out on the Sun family. No. Yi Qing Luo actually loosened the strength of her fingers. After that, she smiled as she looked at Yin Zhenfei, who had just escaped death, panting miserably. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. What does Messenger Yin think? She asked with a light smile. Yin Zhenfei finally escaped the suffocating pain. Hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, Yin Zhenfei's body suddenly trembled. He wanted to speak, but he was afraid of the pain he had just experienced. But Yi Qing Luo didn't give Yin Zhenfei any time to hesitate. Yi Qing Luo's eyes curved. Why? Are you still unwilling to withdraw your guards? She clicked her tongue and glanced at the guards who were standing as straight as a ramrod. Soon after, she shook her head and said, "You are really a good-for-nothing envoy. Even your own subordinates are unwilling to save you. So, even if you leave these guards in the Miao tribe, what's the point?" Yi Qing Luo's voice wasn't soft. The guests also pricked up their ears, wishing they could hear the gossip clearly. After hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, the guests were in an uproar. Speaking of which, this emissary from the Palace of Darkness seems a little strange. Yes. I feel that the guards of the Palace of Darkness don't care about her life at all. How can a guard ignore his master's life like this? I realized something was wrong a long time ago, but I didn't dare to say it. Didn't you feel it? Right from the start, Messenger Yin couldn't order these guards around. It was until she brought out the reputation of the Palace of Darkness before these guards started to take action. It seemed that only Sun family's young miss, and that young miss may kept on flattering her. But those guards from the Palace of Darkness totally didn't treat her as their master. Chapter 2756. Listening to the guest discussions. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes in satisfaction. She had this idea in her mind. Didn't Yin Zhenfei like to bully others? Didn't she like to use her status as the gloomy palace's emissary to enjoy everyone's flattery? Didn't she like to be the center of attention, to be under one, but above all? Then she would shatter Yin Zhenfei's beautiful dream, to let Yin Zhenfei fall from the high and mighty emissary of the upper realm, to become the scum of everyone's ridicule. Now, Yi Qing Luo could totally verify her guess. These gloomy palace's guards totally didn't listen to Yin Zhenfei's arrangements. It could also be said that Yin Zhenfei's status in Gloomy Palace, although her name sounded better than these guards, but her actual power wasn't comparable to these guards. This made Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but think deeper. Yin Zhenfei originally followed Wolf Saint technique and left West Continent, which meant to say Yin Zhenfei wanted to treat herself as the second Yi Qing Qian. After getting close to Wolf Saint technique, dark forces, together with some other forces, built a gloomy palace. Yin Zhenfei was able to become the gloomy palace's emissary, swaggering around Nirvana Realm, recruiting cultivators for Nirvana Realm. It must be Wolf Saint technique's doing. However, Yin Zhenfei's actual power was just an undeserved reputation. Could it be further assumed that dark forces in Gloomy Palace only played a pivotal role? Yi Qing Luo's gaze shot towards that side of the guards once again as her eyes flickered slightly. These guards had some problems. Although, currently, she wasn't sure what was wrong. But she could be sure. These guards were different from ordinary people. If these people were really Gloomy Palace's guards, the power behind this Gloomy Palace was probably hard to deal with. After confirming Yin Zhenfei's status in Gloomy Palace, Yiqing Luo also didn't have the intention to continue teasing Yin Zhenfei. Yin Zhenfei, you should feel lucky. Today is the day my brother Miao Yi takes part in the Sacred Maiden selection, so it's not suitable to see blood. Yiqing Luo laughed lightly as she let go of Yin Zhenfei's neck. Yin Zhenfei's body seemed to have lost all her energy as she fell limply onto the ground. Big Sister Yin, Sun Yutong was just about to go over. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she smiled and blocked her path. What I said is that I won't kill her today, but it doesn't mean that you can bring her away. She didn't want to let the tiger return to the mountain. Although Yin Zhenfei could only be considered a sickly cat at best, but no matter how sick the cat is, when it came to annoying people, it was quite annoying. Last time in the West Continent, letting Yin Zhenfei escape with the Wolf Saint technique was an accident. This time, Yin Zhenfei took the initiative to deliver herself. A cold intent flashed past Yiqing Luo's eyes, and following that, she looked towards a certain direction behind her. Xiao Yi, how about I leave this person to you? Yin Xiao Yi, who was called out, suddenly froze. Yin Xiao Yi's gaze landed on the battered woman who was panting heavily on the ground. Her hands gradually clenched into fists. All right, a word was spat out from her mouth with great force. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her vision shifted onto Qiao Jin as she pouted her lips. Qiao Jin understood her meaning as he gently held Yin Xiao Yi's hand and said in a low voice, I'll bring her over. Later Yi will help you trap her in the Guarray. Saying that, Qiao Jin walked towards Yiqing Luo. He was about to bend down and lift up the battered woman on the ground. Suddenly, the hair by the side of his face suddenly floated messily. Chapter 2757. At the same time, a gust of raging wind suddenly rose, sweeping across the place where Qiao Jin was standing earlier. Boom, boom, boom. The deafening sound of the explosion reverberated through the air. A huge pit was formed on the ground. Dust billowed as it filled the surroundings. The ground also gave off a short period of tremors. If Qiao Jin hadn't avoided it earlier, Qiao Jin would definitely be buried in that huge pit by now. The horizon seemed to have been covered with a thick layer of ink in a split second. It was a patch of darkness, making one feel suffocated. The surrounding guests were stunned by the sudden change in the surroundings. What's going on? What's going on? Why did the weather suddenly change? Numerous terrified discussions resounded in the public square. The guests' hearts had an indescribable feeling of uneasiness as it kept on surging. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she raised her eyes to look at the dark sky, as her pink lips pursed slightly. She looked at Qiao Jin and asked in a low voice, Are you hurt? No. Qiao Jin shook his head, as his expression was grave. They don't come with good intentions. Be careful. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. She naturally felt the oppressive feeling from this surge of energy. Indeed, they didn't come with good intentions. Moreover, they were obviously here for her. She sunk her eyes, and between her eyes, there was an obscure glint. Yin Zhenfei has been brought away. Qiao Jin's gaze swept towards the place where Yin Zhenfei laid earlier. The dust dispersed. Indeed, Yin Zhenfei's figure was nowhere to be seen. Even Sun Yutong and Mei, who were not too far away, had also disappeared. The people from Secluded Palace are here. Qiao Jin immediately reacted. Following that, he instinctively turned around and speedily returned to Yin Xiao Yi's side, as he hugged her shoulders tightly, in a protective posture. Secluded Palace. Yin Xiao Yi's brows creased tightly as she raised her head and looked at the sky full of thick ink. She's really willing to be in cahoots with the devil for power now. Do you still mind? Qiao Jin asked in a low voice. Mind? Yin Xiaoyi's eyes had a moment of chaos. After some time, her lips twitched as she gave a low laugh. Don't mind, I've never asked for family, so why would I mind? Only, I find it rather amusing. The Yin family had bet all their treasures on Yin Jinfei. He was even willing to stand on the side of the dark forces for Yin Jinfei, abandoning the place he grew up in to help the dark forces invade the Western continent. Now, Yin Jinfei didn't just abandon the Yin family. He even sold his soul. If the Yin family knew that the Yin family would end up like this, would he still value Yin Jinfei without any hesitation back then? She chuckled. As she smiled, the expression on her face returned to her usual calmness. All of this had nothing to do with her. The current her only needed Xiao Jin, Yiqing Luo, and the other brothers, and that was enough. Just as the two of them were talking, suddenly, the row of guards from the Palace of Darkness started to move in unison. They quickly stood up straight and straightened their backs. Then, they cupped their fists and respectfully knelt down in a certain direction in the sky. Welcome, Second Palace Master. The guards' voices were loud and clear. The guests were shocked. They dug their ears and looked at the guards kneeling on the ground in disbelief. What did they say? Second Palace Master? The Second Palace Master of the Palace of Darkness. This bunch of guards who disregarded the orders of Yin Jinfei, the Palace of Darkness envoy, were kneeling down to welcome the Second Palace Master. Chapter 2758. The sky was filled with thick ink as the black fog surged. Gradually, a black sedan descended from the sky. Surrounding the sedan were 4 beautiful ladies who looked the same as those Palace of Darkness guards. The black veil floated, and the figure in the sedan was faintly discernible. Dong! The sedan landed on the ground, and a majestic aura spread out in all directions. It made the atmosphere of the grand ceremony to become extremely solemn and solemn. At this moment, the guests even breathed cautiously. This was the Second Palace Lord of Darkness's palace? Everyone was shocked by the Second Palace Lord's aura. But Yiqing Luo's focus wasn't on the Second Palace Lord at all. She squinted her eyes as she looked at those guards who were kneeling on the ground. These guards' actions were a little too neat. Back then, the Godless Island's 3 evils, because they were triplets, their hearts were linked so they were able to move as one. But these guards, even if they had been trained together since young, it was impossible for them to be able to do it perfectly, right? Furthermore, their voices sounded extremely rigid. As compared to Mo Yuying's rigid, it was even more stiff. There was an indescribable strange feeling. These guards, it was probably true, and they were hiding some secret. I heard that someone in the Miao tribe bullied our Palace of Darkness's envoy. The lady's cold voice had a special vixen feeling. A fair jade-like hand lifted up the black veil of the sedan. Following that, an exquisitely dressed lady dressed in the Palace of Darkness's long robe walked out. The lady was wearing a black veil, revealing only that pair of fox-like eyes, which could captivate one's soul. This woman's temperament was filled with the natural charm of a fox, totally not on the same level as May's pretentious, seductive look. The guests present, even if they were ladies, were captivated by the Second Palace Lord of Darkness's beauty. The Second Palace Lord walked down the sedan, and the beautiful maids behind her went forward to support her. The Second Palace Lord's footsteps were elegant and dignified. Her captivating eyes lightly swept past Mei and Yin Jinfei, who were lying on the side of the sedan. Who hurt the Palace of Darkness's envoy? Hu Mei's voice sounded softly. It was just like a normal question. However, everyone knew that it was just an illusion. The more soul-stirringly beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous it was, especially when it was a beautiful woman with such a powerful aura and such a noble identity. What was even more dangerous was that it couldn't be touched. Under the immense pressure, everyone turned their gazes towards Yiqing Luo in unison. The Second Palace Master's enchanting eyes curved into crescents as he followed everyone's gaze and looked over. Their eyes met. The Second Palace Master's eyes flickered and he smiled. Why did you injure our palace's envoy? The second palace lord's voice was very gentle. It was impossible to tell that he was here to seek justice for his envoy at all. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she smiled evilly, legitimate self-defense. The deputy palace master tilted his head and continued to ask with a smile. So, it was my emissary who made the first move? Is it important who made the first move? Yiqing Luo had no interest in second palace lord's smiling tiger mask. The deputy palace master did not get angry. Instead, he nodded in agreement. Indeed, it's not important. The two of them spoke one after another. The surrounding guests were all dumbfounded. According to the normal development of the plot, shouldn't they take action directly and fight? Chapter 2759. None of the guests had noticed the undercurrent between Yiqing Luo and Second Palace Lord. But that didn't mean that DMO Xian and the rest couldn't sense it. Zhou Mo poked his own arm as he trembled while looking at Gue Wu. Do all women get along like this? Her face was smiling and her tone was gentle. But every word and sentence was filled with undercurrent. On the other side, Yiqing Luo's smile was tainted with a trace of treachery. She tilted her head as the smile in her eyes became more and more evil. Since it's not important, why did Second Palace Lord ask? Second Palace Lord seemed to be tired of the confrontation with Yiqing Luo as she lowered her eyes and continued laughing. Young lady, the important thing is, you hurt my envoy. So, what does Second Palace Lord intend to do? Yiqing Luo raised her brows evilly. Second Palace Lord slowly walked towards Yiqing Luo as her actions were elegant and noble. You also know that the reputation of the secluded palace cannot be destroyed. You hurt my envoy, and that is challenging the prestige of the secluded palace. If I don't seek justice for the secluded palace's envoy, how would I be able to bear the title of Second Palace Lord? Young lady, do you think what I said is right? I thought that the secluded palace had long lost its reputation. Yiqing Luo didn't have any intention to retreat as she looked at Second Palace Lord, who was walking over with a smile. Second Palace Lord brought along an oppressive aura, as though she wanted to envelop Yiqing Luo in her oppressive aura. Yiqing Luo's brows raised slightly as her eyes were calm. After all, your envoy can't even command a guard. Until Yiqing Luo finished her words. Second Palace Lord didn't say a word. She raised her brows in interest as she sized Yiqing Luo up, as though she was surprised about something. This daring young lady was totally unafraid of her oppressive aura. The Second Palace Master's interest was piqued. Her mesmerizing eyes curved even more, and the smile in her voice deepened. Young lady, you're right. That's why I've come all the way here to punish these guards who have no foresight. Second Palace Lord's last word was settled. Faintly, there was a biting, cold, murderous intent. Following that, there was a burst of horrifying air wave. Bam! The Second Palace Master waved his sleeves. The thick, profound energy was as fast as lightning as it charged towards the guards of the Abyss Palace who were kneeling in a row and not moving at all. Dong, dong, dong. Several heavy objects fell to the ground. The dozen or so secluded palace guards didn't even have the chance to scream before they died. They fell to the ground one after another. However, the most frightening thing was not the Second Palace Master's ruthless killing. Instead, it was extremely strange. It was so strange that the guests, who were used to seeing killing, all stood up. Some even screamed. When many women saw this scene, they all leaned towards the men beside them, seeking comfort. On the ground, the guards of the Dark Abyss Palace laid motionlessly. There was a kind of creepy feeling. The dozen guards were originally kneeling in a neat row on the ground. At this moment, they were neatly lined up in a row. One by one, they neatly fell to the ground. Be it the posture or the expression, they were all exactly the same, without the slightest deviation. This was only one of the strangest things. Chapter 2760. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she took a closer look. After staring for some time, she frowned slightly. Could it be that the reason why these guards died was because the second palace lord's profound chi had condensed into a blade and slit their necks? But that wasn't right. Why was it that when their necks were slit, there wasn't a drop of blood? Was it because this second palace lord's skills were swift? No, no matter how fast it was impossible that there wasn't a drop of blood. What on earth was going on? This second palace lord, what on earth is she doing? She actually killed her own people? Isn't she afraid that after killing those guards, no one will protect her? She only has those 4 personal maids by her side. If something really happened, will they be able to protect her? Are you silly? Immediately, a guest retorted, didn't we see how powerful those guards were? However, the vice palace master of the gloomy palace only moved her sleeves and easily killed more than 10 guards at the same time. Can't you see her strength? The second palace lord of the Nether Palace is totally able to fight against 100. Why would she need the protection of those guards? Isn't it because she's the second palace lord of the Nether Palace, and these guards are unable to resist? Earlier second palace lord Speed, if it was you, would you be able to evade it? That guest who had doubts immediately kept quiet. That's right, the moment the second palace lord made her move. They were all enveloped by the tumbling airwaves and felt as if their bodies and minds were being burned by raging flames. How would they have any energy left to evade the second palace lord's attack? The guest suddenly recalled that when Yi Luo was surrounded by those guards, he only used his speed and agility to evade the guards' encirclement. But towards those guards, he obviously had no way to fight against them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have captured Messenger Yin and used him to threaten him, to make those guards leave the Miao tribe. Master Gei Wu said that Yi Luo was Earth Profound 9th grade and was about to step into the Sky Profound realm. Yi Luo wasn't a match for the guards of the Nether Palace, but the second palace lord of the Nether Palace could easily wipe out those guards, which meant the second palace lord's profound grade was above Yi Luo. In other words, above the Sky Profound realm. Furthermore, it wasn't just the Sky Profound realm. This idea caused an uproar among the guests. Towards the power and strength of the Dark Nether Palace, he was filled with yearning. After all, this other world was a place where the strong ruled and the weak were prey to the strong. Anything that could be explained with fists would never be explained with words. Previously, Yi Luo had been very powerful. The scale of the guests was tipping towards Yi Luo. Now, the Vice Palace Master of Gloomy Palace had appeared. The balance of the crowd immediately tilted towards the Dark Palace. The Assistant Palace Master sensed the respect and reverence the guests had for her. A trace of disdain appeared on her face. She narrowed her mesmerizing eyes and chuckled softly. Although it was separated by a layer of black gauze, one could still vaguely see the outline and lines of the face under the veil. Her smile and frown were extremely charming. These useless trash, I've already settled them now. Second Palace Lord's gaze slowly shifted onto Yi Qing Luo as his smile deepened. It's your turn. As the second Palace Master's voice fell, her eyes, which were originally filled with smiles, at this moment, it suddenly froze into frost. Her arms opened wide as her body floated in midair. Chapter 2761. Light laughter spilled out from Second Palace Lord's mouth, extremely savage and extremely complacent. Suddenly, she raised her arm high up in the air. The surrounding airwaves surged and surged, flying towards the Second Palace Master's raised arm to attack. Kacha! A bolt of lightning tore a huge hole in the inky black sky. Second Palace Lord floated in midair. That tore hole was right behind her. It made her look as though she was an Azura who had crawled out from the entrance of hell. It made one's hair stand on end ineffably. The inky black sky surged. The raging wind brought along a raging wave of energy as it spread majestically across the entire public square. Strong. What powerful energy. Everyone's heart almost stopped beating at this moment. This energy had absolutely surpassed Yi Luo's energy by far. Yi Luo, this young genius young lady, was probably going to die here today. The guests felt some pity in their hearts. After Gu Jingyu sensed that man's powerful energy, his body suddenly turned stiff. You still don't intend to make a move? Miss Yi is not Secluded Palace's second palace lord's opponent. His entire body was tensed up, as though he was suppressing something. DMO Xian's gaze didn't turn as he stared at Yi Qing Luo's figure without blinking, as though he didn't hear Gu Jingyu's words at all. Gu Jingyu gritted his teeth. This man was wearing a half mask on his face. He couldn't tell the emotions on this man's face at all. Wasn't this man Yi Luo's fiancé? Why was he so indifferent towards Yi Luo's misfortune? Since this fiancé of yours is afraid of death, then don't blame me for interfering in your relationship. Gu Jingyu sensed the second palace lord's profound qi fluctuating, and he couldn't bear it any longer. He flicked his sleeves and was about to charge towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. However, a single hand stopped him in his tracks. Zomo raised one hand lazily as his narrow phoenix eyes rose upwards. Young sect Master Gu, what are you trying to do? I'm going to save Miss Yi. Gu Jingyu raised his hand and chopped at Zomo's arm. Young Master Mo, please step aside. Anyone with discerning eyes can tell that you have feelings for little Qing Luo. You want to save her. Are you trying to let those people assume that you and little Qing Luo have an affair? Zomo didn't move at all. Gu Jingyu's face sunk, and his eyes were filled with ridicule as he shot a glance at DMO Xian's direction. Yes, this young patriarch admires Miss Yi. Since Lady Ye's fiancé doesn't know how to cherish Lady Yi, then this young master will cherish her. Do you think you're a match for the vice palace master of the secluded palace? Zomo laughed. Cherish? Running to your death and making little Qing Luo feel guilty towards you, remembering you in her heart for the rest of her life. This kind of cherishing? Gu Jingyu clenched his fists. This young lord is indeed not the second palace master's opponent. But to have this young lord stand here and watch, this young lord cannot do that. But this young lord will not let you make a move. Zomo smiled elegantly as his arm suddenly hooked around Gu Jingyu's shoulder. Following that, he forcefully pulled Gu Jingyu over to Gue Wu's side. As he walked, he said, Young sect Master Gu, little Qing Luo's fiancé's feelings towards little Qing Luo, you won't understand. Just stand here obediently. Don't let little Qing Luo be distracted and drag her down. Gu Jingyu was still struggling, but no matter what, he was unable to break free from Zomo's restraint. Because of this, Gu Jingyu didn't see it. Chapter 2762. His eyes were focused and serious. In his mind, there was a blurry face that he couldn't see clearly. That face was smiling at him. Her coquettish voice seemed to be able to soothe all the bad emotions in his heart. Xian, I want to grow up alone. I want to rely on my own strength to stand by your side and walk side by side with you. The girl was smiling. Vaguely, he seemed to see that alluring face. It only took an instant for everything to return to its previous tranquility. DMO Xian shut his deep eyes. He forcefully suppressed the restlessness that was constantly surging in his heart. He knew that person was Lil Luo Air, even if their appearances were different. He could also confirm that person was Lil Luo Air. He promised Lil Luo Air it would give Little Luo a chance to grow. He should believe in Lil Luo. His Little Luo Air would become stronger when meeting strong opponents and weaker when meeting weak opponents. There was absolutely no problem. However, there was always a voice in his heart that kept floating in his mind. They were clamoring for him to charge forward. Protect his Little Luo Air. Protect his Lil Luo. He would not let Lil Luo be harmed in the slightest. DMO Xian clenched his fist tightly as he clenched it even harder. Everyone's attention was gathered on Yi Qing Luo's side. No one noticed it. DMO Xian's eyes were hidden under the mask. His gaze towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with determination and forbearance. Sometimes they were infatuated with each other. This was the struggle between the love worm and DMO Xian's consciousness. Love Gu activated his consciousness. He wanted him to protect Yi Qing Luo unconditionally, whereas the memories regarding Yi Qing Luo kept replaying in DMO Xian's mind. Such a crisscrossing consciousness was activated. This made DMO Xian's body gradually tensed up. However, no one noticed this. Even if he found out, he would only treat it as worrying about Yi Qing Luo. The other side, Yi Qing Luo raised her head up high and squinted her eyes slightly, looking at the second palace lord who was suspended in midair. The corners of her mouth curled into a teasing smile, revealing a hint of carelessness. It was as if he didn't care about the second palace master at all. But Yi Qing Luo indeed didn't treat the second palace lord as anything. She admitted, the assistant palace master was indeed very strong. Indeed, it was above her profound rank. However, it was not that she was no match for the deputy palace master. Just as DMO Xian had said, she had a physique that grew stronger when encountering the strong and weaker when encountering the weak. The stronger the opponent, only then would her fighting spirit be aroused. The stronger the opponent, only then would she be able to gain actual combat experience and grow. Most importantly, as the saying goes, the connoisseur recognizes the artistry, while the layman enjoys the show. In the eyes of the crowd, the surging waves of terrifying aura of the second palace master were extremely horrifying and intimidating. But in the eyes of Yi Qing Luo and the other top exponents, that second palace master kept showing off and creating cool special effects. From the start, it didn't have the slightest bit of actual strength. In the air, layers upon layers of airwaves were constantly surging. Behind the second palace master, the streaks of lightning that had been torn apart continuously converged and spread out bit by bit. The profound qi, at this moment, suddenly expanded. The second palace master's gaze was like a torch as he stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo. His raised arm instantly pointed downwards towards Yi Qing Luo's face. Anyone who dares to offend my secluded palace shall be killed without mercy. The raging waves of profound qi were like huge waves surging as it attacked the biting cold profound qi. At the same time, Yi Qing Luo could clearly feel the surging profound qi blowing toward her face. Chapter 2763. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as the smile on her lips blossomed like a poppy. His eyes were gradually filled with excitement. Her eyes flickered and her entire temperament suddenly changed. She was an elegant and lovely little beauty. At this moment, she had turned into a bloodthirsty and enchanting demon. Her eyes were filled with smiles as she looked at the incoming attack. This time, she had no intention of dodging. Instead, her palms moved and her fingertips danced like a dancing fairy. A red feather fan appeared on her fingertips. Swoosh! The feather fan was opened and the red profound glow lingered around the feather fan. Under the lightning cliff, it gave off an extremely demonic aura, like a scorching flame, burning continuously. With Yi Qing Luo as the epicenter, the ground started to crack, densely like a spider web as the cracks spread out. All these seemed to have taken quite a bit of effort. In actual fact, it was merely a moment. Bam! Vice Palace Lord's attack landed directly. Dust and thick and terrifying air waves rolled, enveloping Yi Qing Luo's surroundings instantly. It engulfed and covered up everything in the surroundings. Everyone's gazes were fixed on that area, which was engulfed by the numerous airwaves. One by one, they shook their heads and sighed. Indeed, Earth Profound 9th grade was after all not comparable to the Sky Mystic Overlord and above. However, with just one move, he had easily taken care of a 9th grade Earth Profound Realm Xian practitioner. The power of the Gloomy Palace was indeed well-deserved. Some even felt that if the Vice Palace Lord was so powerful, then the Grand Palace Lord of the Gloomy Palace could be on the same level as the Overlord. No wonder the Gloomy Palace dared to say such words. To be able to surpass the Imperial Palace within a month. Looking at the Gloomy Palace, they could easily annihilate a bunch of powerful guards. Another Earth Profound 9th grade cultivator, which Master Ghost Martial Artist had high hopes of, This gloomy palace could absolutely surpass the imperial palace. Ding! All of a sudden, a crisp sound could be heard. The sound was extremely hurried. Instantly, it attracted everyone's attention, only to see in that dust and airwaves. A bewitching red glow gradually spread out. The boundless air waves rolled like a tide. In just a few breaths' time, he had completely suppressed that powerful air wave. The red light continued to spread. It dispersed the chi wave created by the second palace master. Amidst the red light, the young girl's red dress fluttered in the wind like a blossoming rose, extremely flirtatious. The girl held a burning fan in her hand, and her fingers danced in the air. The fan opened and closed like a fire elf flying in the airwaves. Clang! There was the sound of things colliding again. Yiqing Luo opened her arms wide. The fan in her hand, unknowingly, had already left Yiqing Luo's hand. It was moving at an extremely fast speed. He broke through the layers of air waves created by the second palace master. It struck a long sword in front of the second palace master. The instant the fan hit the long sword, the sword trembled. The layer of black mist that shrouded the long sword suddenly dispersed. Thump! A heavy object fell to the ground. The long sword fell to the ground. At the same time, the body of the second palace master, who was floating in the air, swayed and unexpectedly fell down uncontrollably. The second palace master's robes fluttered like butterfly wings. The black veil on her face was lifted, revealing half of her face. Yiqing Luo's gaze coincidentally fell on that half of her face. Suddenly, her eyes dimmed and her body froze. That face, was it her illusion? If she didn't remember wrongly. Chapter 2764. Damn it. This unforeseen event caused the assistant palace master's tone to be filled with killing intent. She raised her wrist abruptly, just as she was about to land on the ground. A thick black fog surrounded her body. His rapidly falling body instantly landed steadily on the ground, as light as a feather. She steadied herself and flipped her wrist once again. The long sword on the ground seemed to be sucked by something as it returned to her palm. Second Palace Lord's weapon is just a long sword. The young lady's clear voice was heard from behind. Her hand, which was holding the long sword, stiffened. Immediately, she turned sideways and tried to escape. But her feet had just started to move. He placed a hand on the second palace master's shoulder. The young lady's extremely melodious voice was heard clearly. "Isn't second palace lord going to clear the name of secluded palace? Why did you run away so impatiently the moment you saw me?" The young lady was still smiling. That soft and slender fingers which were pinching on her shoulder looked weak and boneless. But she couldn't break free at all. As for the young lady, she didn't move at all. Under Yiqing Luo's strength, the second palace master turned around. She raised her eyes and met with a pair of narrow and devilish eyes. That pair of eyes were as bright as the stars, sparkling brightly. And faintly, there was a glint of flowing light. Just a glance. The second palace master had a feeling as though her soul was being sucked away. It was Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo's seemingly elegant face, but her aura did not diminish at all. The second palace master's heart thumped fiercely. Her mind recalled that person's exhortation in her ear. "Be careful, especially towards that lady named Yiqing Luo. You must be on guard. Her ability is not as good as yours, but her potential is terrifying." She thought that in this lower realm, even if she met any genius cultivator, that person could only be considered as a genius from the lower realm. Because of that, she didn't put that person's exhortation to heart. However, at that moment, she seemed to have understood what that person meant. The second palace master's eyes turned slightly cold. She had underestimated her opponent. This time round, she would not give Yiqing Luo any chance to retaliate. A thought flashed across his mind. The vice palace master's expression suddenly became cold and gloomy. At the same time, profound chi surged from the assistant palace master's body. Two streams of profound chi that looked like black fog shot out from her body. transforming into two rays of profound light. With an irresistible force, it shot towards Yi Qing Luo's face, directly piercing downwards. But the assistant palace master's plan failed again. Just as the second palace master's expression changed, Yi Qing Luo had already sensed it. At the moment when the Xian Qi of the second palace master surged wildly, she immediately let go of her hands and moved to a safe place. Yi Qing Luo wasn't flustered in the slightest. The expression on her face was calm and tranquil. It was a stark contrast to the deputy palace master's eyes, which were filled with rage. Is the second palace lord getting serious? Yi Qing Luo's sweet voice was mixed with a slight smile. She looked like the girl next door, pure and innocent. However, the second palace master could see it clearly. The young lady's smiling eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. The vice palace master's eyes darkened. Her profound qi surged once again. Her eyes were aghast as she gave Yi Qing Luo a warning stare. Chapter 2765. As she said that, she looked meaningfully at the long sword in Second Palace Lord's hand. Second Palace Lord's eyes were filled with emotions as her bewitching eyes stared widely. How do you know that this weapon isn't my weapon? Yi Qing Luo shook her glower flame fan and held it against her lower jaw. The longsword body is wide, and the sword hilt is thick and the surface is stained with too much filthy blood stench. It doesn't look like a lady's weapon. She raised her brows and continued confidently. This long sword should be given to Second Palace Lord by someone who values Second Palace Lord, to protect Second Palace Lord. Earlier, Second Palace Lord was suspended in midair, when she was creating all kinds of powerful pressure. The long sword was firmly placed in front of the Second Palace Master's body. It was because she sensed that the long sword didn't look like Second Palace Lord's weapon. That was why Yi Qing Luo directly struck down that long sword. As expected, just as she had guessed, this Second Palace Lord was the source of most of the profound energy. It was because of that long sword. What an observant young lady! When Second Palace Lord heard that, she didn't continue to refute. She sneered as she placed the long sword on her body and spoke coldly. Young lady, since you're looking for death, I shall fulfill your wish. Her words had just ended. Second Palace Lord opened her fingers. A long whip with 9 segments appeared in her hand. The surrounding guests all sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw that long whip clearly. On that long whip, there was a tide of black fog which kept surging. Faintly, there was a flash of lightning like flowing light. It gave out a hissing sound. Was that a long whip or a poisonous snake? No matter how the crowd looked, they couldn't see clearly what the soft object under the fog was. When Yi Qing Luo saw Second Palace Lord's weapon, her expression dimmed slightly as the serene look in her eyes turned deeper. Long whip. It was indeed a long whip. She didn't see it wrongly. This Second Palace Lord's face. Yi Qing Luo stared at the layer of black veil on Second Palace Lord's face. Her gaze was burning as though it was burning. Second Palace Lord was distracted by Yi Qing Luo's presumptuous gaze. She clenched the long whip tightly as the black qi lingered around it and struck directly. A powerful wave of qi swept out. The surging waves once again filled the air. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a sneer as she casually played with the glower flame fan in her hands. The moment the Second Palace Master's attack landed, Yi Qing Luo's figure swayed. The two sides clashed. This time round, Yi Qing Luo didn't adopt any battle tactics. Instead, he faced the assistant palace master head-on. Powerful air waves constantly rolled in the air. The sky that was as dark as ink was covered densely with dark clouds at this moment, and it was mixed with lightning and thunder, causing the atmosphere to be extremely strange. Over here, the battle was in full swing. On the other side, it was completely impossible to see the silhouettes of both parties clearly, and they could only feel the vast and boundless profound energy. At this moment, the guests, who were bursting forth and rolling about, were in an uproar. A guest pointed at the two people fighting, his face full of disbelief. Did I see wrongly? Just now I saw glowing flame fan. That woman called Yi Luo has the gourd flame fan? Gourd flame fan. Isn't that the weapon used by that young hero of the Western continent? Gourd flame fan. There seems to be only one in this world. Why is it in Yi Luo's hands? The appearance of the gourd flame fan aroused the suspicions of numerous guests. Chapter 2766. Most of the people in Nirvana Realm knew about Yi Qing Luo's deeds. Naturally, they knew about Yi Qing Luo's exclusive weapon. Suddenly, the guests thought of something as they exclaimed, Yi Luo, Yi Qing Luo. The Overlord has publicly acknowledged the future mistress of the Imperial Palace, dressed in red, devastatingly beautiful. Overlord, red, Yi Luo, Yi Luo, Yi Qing Luo. The guests at this moment in their minds regrouped all these symbols together. Everything indicated the lady named Yi Luo in front of them was the little hero of the West Continent, Yi Qing Luo, and only Yi Qing Luo could possess the only glower flame fan in the world. And only Yi Qing Luo could get so much attention from the Overlord. And only Yi Qing Luo, at such a young age, her profound grade had already broken through the sky profound stage, becoming the only one in Nirvana Realm at such a young age to step into the sky profound stage. Not Earth profound 9th grade, but sky profound supreme. She is Yi Qing Luo, the Yi Qing Luo who is known as the female version of the Overlord. Suddenly, among the guests, a sharp female voice was heard, only to see a slender figure in a cloak, covering her face, suddenly stood up and stared at the two people who were entangled with each other. Her tone was filled with disbelief. On the side, a figure in the same cloak grabbed the arm of the lady in front and shook it anxiously. The lady in front turned her head to look at the lady behind her and impatiently shook her hand away. That lady staggered and fell onto the ground. The surrounding was a long table. The lady's head directly hit the long table when she fell. A loud dong sound was heard. It was extremely loud. When the crowd heard it, they felt a pain in their head. But unfortunately, that lady rubbed her forehead and stood up without a word. Not even a cry of pain was made. The lady in front didn't feel guilty because of her own actions. The wide black cloak covered her expression, only to hear her slightly hoarse voice, sharp and ear-piercing. How could she be Yi Qing Luo? Impossible. She is obviously a lowly student. The guests only felt that this voice sounded extremely familiar. But at this moment, they couldn't recall. The guests sitting next to the woman suddenly looked at each other. Then, they stood up at the same time and rushed toward the woman who was rubbing her forehead. The woman was caught off guard, and her hands were tightly held by the two guests. The guest raised his hand and lifted the woman's cloak. Under the cloak, a small and delicate face was revealed. The expressions of the two guests suddenly changed. Princess Balon. Wasn't this woman the Northern Wave Continent's princess, Xiao Lingling? Why was Xiao Lingling here? Wasn't the Northern Wave imperial family in imminent danger? Xiao Lingling's position as the princess was already in jeopardy. How could Xiao Lingling appear here? Wait, this is Xiao Lingling. Then, who was that sharp-tongued lady? When the woman saw that Xiao Lingling's face had been exposed, she cursed softly, "Trash!" He quickly turned around, intending to leave. However, the crowd who had already found out about Yi Qing Luo's true identity. He couldn't wait to find a chance to curry favor with Yi Qing Luo. How could they possibly let off that lady who obviously had enmity with Yi Qing Luo? Immediately, a few guests swarmed up and held that woman down, lifting the black cloak. That person, wasn't she East Wave's young princess, Lanling Nuo? Chapter 2767. After Lanling Nuo was discovered, her expression instantly became somewhat ugly. She bit her lower lip tightly. The surrounding people were sizing her up with gazes which made her feel extremely embarrassed. But both her hands were restrained by the guests, so there was no way for her to struggle. Xiao Lingling made a nasal sound towards Lanling Nuo's direction. Her eyes were filled with fear and uneasiness. The crowd then recalled. Xiao Lingling's tongue had already been plucked out by the overlord. So, it's these two young princesses who are about to become commoners. Ha ha! Do you feel especially slapped on the face? Some of them had long disliked these two princesses' way of doing things, and now that they had the chance, they couldn't help but ridicule them. Previously, I always felt that no matter if it was status, ability, or looks, I'm much stronger than Miss Yi. But now, ha! Miss Yi is the little hero of the West Continent, a genius with outstanding ability. Ha ha! The crowd roared with laughter, but they had long forgotten about it. Before this, their own, Lan Ling Nuo and Xia Lingling's attitude towards Yiqing Luo was no different, just as the crowd was making a ruckus. A low and sullen voice, like 1,000 caddy-lead brick, fell heavily on everyone's hearts, pressuring them till they couldn't breathe. Shut up. It was just two simple words. The laughter and clamor stopped abruptly. The crowd turned their gazes towards the man who spoke out. His tall figure was tall and towering. Under the half-gold-rimmed mask, two eyes that were as deep as a lake seemed to be condensed with layers of frost. This was Yiqing Luo's fiancé. No, Yiqing Luo's fiancé. Wasn't he the overlord? This man was the overlord. The crowd's hearts suddenly felt a suffocating feeling. All the words were stuck in their throats. They didn't dare to make any noise. After all, Yiqing Luo was still in a life and death struggle with the second palace lord of Secluded Palace. The overlord's emotions were definitely unstable. If they made any noise and touched Yiqing Luo's bad luck, they would definitely be punished by the overlord. After a few big moves clashed against the moves, Yiqing Luo and Vice Palace Lord both retreated backwards. Because of the collision of the two's profound energies, the entire plaza's ground had already cracked open into pieces. The ground was full of holes and gravel. The raised platform and the flags fell to the ground. No matter how the two of them fought, it didn't even affect the guests. Second Palace Master retracted his long whip. His eyes were sinister as if he was dipped in poison, ruthlessly cutting Yiqing Luo's body. You really have some skills. Yiqing Luo's fingertips flicked as she played with the glower flame fan. Her jade-white fingers fused with the raging flames. In the eyes of others, Yiqing Luo was like a fairy who controlled the flames, noble and mysterious. She raised her lips and smiled in a low voice. Her eyes were also smiling. Vice Palace Master, you couldn't beat me before. Now, no matter what method you use to quickly raise your profound level, but I can tell you for sure, you can't beat me no matter what. The Vice Palace Master clenched his fists and frowned. What do you mean? Before what? Did I know you before? 3 consecutive questions made Yiqing Luo squint at her eyes. She stared at the Vice Palace Master confidently for some time. Her carefree expression slowly converged and turned grave. Chapter 2768. Second Palace Lord's brows creased even tighter. The eyes under the veil looked at Yiqing Luo in bewilderment. She seemed to be pondering whether Yiqing Luo's actions were some kind of scheme. Try to lure her into a trap? Second Palace Lord silence. Yiqing Luo saw it all. She could clearly see the unfamiliarity in Second Palace Lord's eyes. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and paused for a moment. Wait, are you sure you don't recognize me? After she finished her words, she raised her slender fingers and caressed her face. Her fingers were tapping and exploring her face at an extremely fast speed. In just a moment, an extremely thin layer of something, like a water droplet, rolled on her palm. That is indeed, it's Yiqing Luo. Heavens! Indeed, as the rumors described, a red robe that could topple the world. This is simply able to topple all living things. I will not say that the rumors are fake anymore. The moment Yiqing Luo's thin mask was removed, the surrounding guests immediately burst into an uproar. It wasn't that they hadn't seen a beauty before, but they had never seen such an exquisite, enchanting beauty. Plus, The beauty was noble and elegant, with an unattainable temperament. What's more, once people's gazes landed on her, they couldn't take their eyes off her. The young lady's skin was crystal clear, as fair as snow, especially that exquisite picturesque face. Devastatingly beautiful, peerlessly enchanting. Slender eyebrows, dazzling eyes, so beautiful that it made one suffocate. The guests exclaimed one after another. To tell the truth, when they saw East Billow's young princess, Lanling Nuo, they really felt that Lanling Nuo deserved the title of East Billow's #1 beauty. But now that they had seen Yiqing Luo's real face, Lanling Nuo's so-called #1 beauty title was simply a slap on the face. Compared to Yiqing Luo, the difference was not just 1 or 2 points. And when Yiqing Luo's face was revealed, Xia Lingling and Lanling Nuo, who were restrained by the guests, immediately had a change of expression. Lanling Nuo's struggle was forgotten. Her pair of beautiful eyes seemed to be coated with poison as she stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo's direction. Impossible! How could this be possible? That ugly girl! How could she be Yiqing Luo? This must be fake. You're all lying to me. Lanling Nuo couldn't accept this and roared in anger. Xia Lingling's eyes widened in astonishment. Her body, which was held by the guests, began to tremble slightly. She could not speak, but the frantic shaking of her head showed that she was the same as Lanling Nuo, unable to believe everything that was happening before her eyes. Whereas for Yiqing Luo, towards the guests' reactions, she had no reaction at all. She put the skin back into the profound phoenix ring. Shortly after, she placed her finger on her chin and fixed her charming eyes on the second palace master. Now, do you recognize it? The second palace master's tightly knitted eyebrows had already formed several wrinkles. Second palace lord looked at Yiqing Luo's devastatingly beautiful face. There wasn't a single bit of shock or hatred in her eyes, which Yiqing Luo had expected. Gradually, a layer of vigilance appeared in the eyes of the second palace master. He asked doubtfully, "Who are you? Why should this consort recognize you?" The look in the vice palace master's eyes and her unfamiliar tone of voice. This made Yiqing Luo restrain the emotions in her eyes. Had she seen wrongly earlier? Or this so-called second palace master had lost her memory? If the second palace master was really that person, at the moment she saw her. Chapter 2769. However, just now, when a second palace master's veil flew up, it landed on Yiqing Luo's face, but it was clearly imprinted in her mind. That face had been in her memory for more than 10 years. How could he be mistaken? Yiqing Luo pursed her pink lips. Her eyes congealed slightly as she asked word by word, Are you Yiqing Qian?" He had seen the face of the deputy palace master from the very beginning. It was no different from Yiqing Qian's face. That was why she had noticed the weapon used by the second palace master. Then, he forced the second palace master to reveal her true weapon, the long whip. Yiqing Qian's weapon was a long whip. This made Yiqing Luo even more certain of the second palace lord's identity. However, she took off her human skin and revealed her true appearance. The deputy palace master's reaction made her doubt her own conjecture. Yiqing Qian. The second palace lord murmured this name softly, without any other emotions in his eyes. Obviously, the second palace master was also unfamiliar with this name. Could it be second palace lord really wasn't Yiqing Qian? Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased even tighter. In his mind, he kept recalling the last time he saw Yiqing Qian. In her memory, Yiqing Qian was fed a pill by her to hang on to her life. Then, she beat him into a meat patty. Her face was completely ruined. His body had also become a pile of rotten meat. In the end, the Wolf Saint technique gave up. The effect of the medicine could only last for a few hours at most. Once the effect of the drug wore off, Yiqing Qian would rot and die in agony. However, the second palace master in front of him, regardless of appearance or figure, she was no different from Yiqing Qian. What was going on? "Little girl, I don't have time to waste on you. Don't think of any roundabout schemes. I won't fall for it. Vice Palace Master's hair stood on end from Yi Qing Luo's gaze. After the goosebumps, it was followed by the frustration of being humiliated. The second Palace Master's long whip moved, and his profound energy surged, once again setting off raging waves. Profound chi that caused one's heart to palpitate swept out like a tide. The airwaves lingering in the air were also rolling more and more violently. Yi Qing Luo's reaction was swift at the instant when the second Palace Master made his move. She moved quickly. A glimmer of light flickered in her charming eyes. With a flick of her fingers, the glowing flame fan unfurled itself from her fingertips. Carrying a profound energy that could contend against the second Palace Master, she directly welcomed the attack. Meanwhile, Yi Qing Luo's feet floated swiftly. His movement technique, which had been fused with the teleportation secret art, was unleashed to its fullest in this instant. In the blink of an eye, Second Palace Lord's long whip had just collided with Yi Qing Luo's profound chi. The sound of air currents rippling could be heard. The second Palace Master's expression changed as he realized something. She retracted her whip and quickly retreated. However, even if the second Palace Master's reaction speed was already godlike, it was still not enough. However, he was still a step too late. Just as the second Palace Master retreated, a red figure followed like a shadow into the eyes of the assistant Palace Master. The girl's pink lips curled up slightly, and there was a trace of unknown emotion in her eyes. She held out her hand. Her slender, fair fingers tugged on the second Palace Master's black veil. The young girl's pink lips moved slightly, and using a voice that only the two of them could hear, she said, "Although second Palace Master's performance made me feel that I might have seen wrongly. But if I don't confirm it with my own eyes, I'm afraid I won't be able to be at ease." Presumptuous. The second Palace Master's eyes widened as she raised her hand and slapped down on the young girl's shoulder. But Yi Qing Luo laughed softly. Chapter 2770. At the same time, under her feet, a complicated footwork was displayed at this moment. Second Palace Lord's palm wind barely brushed past Yi Qing Luo's shoulder and hit the ground. And the black veil on Second Palace Lord's face was pulled down by Yi Qing Luo. That veil was fixed to Second Palace Lord's hair. Yi Qing Luo's pull. She also pulled the hairpin fixed to Second Palace Lord's hair. A head of black hair scattered messily, like ink pouring behind her. Without the black veil covering her face, it was revealed in Yi Qing Luo's eyes. The woman's face was exquisite, a pair of captivating eyes, slightly raised, giving a very seductive arc small and straight nose. Bright red lips, revealing a tempting luster. This face. It was indeed Yi Qing Qian's face. Exactly the same facial features, not a single bit different. But it felt like something was different. For example, temperament, like feeling. As compared to the previous Yi Qing Qian, this face was more captivating. In the most straightforward words, it was the previous Yi Qing Qian, even if she was smiling, flirtatious and flirtatious. In other people's eyes, this was indeed very beautiful. But beauty was only that for a moment. Once it was over, it would be thrown to the back of one's mind. But the current Yi Qing Qian was different. The current Yi Qing Qian had a kind of extremely seductive temperament. The entire person was like a fox spirit transforming into a human. Every move, every smile, and every frown. Both of them exuded a kind of unforgettable charm that would be engraved in one's heart. This person was Yi Qing Qian, but also not Yi Qing Qian. Yi Qing Luo stared at Second Palace Lord's face. Her half-squinted eyes had some fluctuations. At the guest seating, numerous people also saw Second Palace Lord's face. One must know, Yi Qing Qian's identity was the eldest miss of Three Springs sect, although Yi Qing Luo took over the position of young sect master. But in the entire Nirvana realm, who didn't treat Yi Qing Qian as the next Three Springs sect master? Because of this, Yi Qing Qian represented the Yi family, attending many banquets. Her portrait was also circulated in Nirvana realm. Naturally, many people recognized her. Immediately, they couldn't help but shout out, Yi Qing Qian. This name, which could be considered familiar, became a hot topic among the guests. The second palace master's ashen face gradually turned uglier and uglier as he listened to the discussions around him. An indescribable emotion surged in her beautiful eyes. Gradually, she raised her hand and touched her face. From her mouth, she lightly spat out 3 words, Yi, Qing, Qian. As his voice fell, the second palace master clenched his fists and a strange sneer appeared on his face. She kept her whip and turned around, walking towards the direction of the sedan. Take them, let's go. The second palace master lifted the black veil and sat in the sedan. The 4 beautiful maids each grabbed Mei, Yinjin Fei, Sun Yutong, and the others, then lifted the palanquin and flew away. Yiqing Luo stood at her original spot, with no intention to stop him. They watched as the second palace master's palanquin disappeared into the ink-black sky. The cold and charming voice of the vice palace master came with the wind. Little girl, don't celebrate too early. The palace of darkness will take revenge for your offense. The wind stopped. The voice dissipated. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she kept her glower flame fan. Just as she was about to return to Mo Xian's side, she hadn't even turned around. A strong and powerful arm had already encircled her waist. Chapter 2771. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with a smile as she turned around and her arms circled around the person behind her, Xian. His arms tightened around her waist. It was very powerful. It was as if he wanted to rub her delicate body into his. Yiqing Luo had just turned around and was only able to call out his name. The man's overbearing and forceful kiss drowned out all sounds. He kissed her very hard. It was different from the gentleness and cautiousness from before. Instead, it was a kind of ferocity that was close to that of a wild beast, as if it wanted to swallow her whole. Yiqing Luo's breathing was almost swallowed by him. The mask on the man's face was somewhat enchanting. Yiqing Luo's mind went blank for a moment. Her hands gripped the man's collar tightly. In the end, he had almost no strength left. She could only rely on Mo Xian's arm to support her body. Perhaps it was because Mo Xian's kiss was too intense. Perhaps it was because they were in public and there were at least 700 or 800 people watching from the side. Yiqing Luo's face was extremely red. The reaction was also very strong. Finally, after this kiss, Mo Xian let her off when he saw that she was out of breath. However, his arms were still tightly wrapped around her. Xian. Her voice sounded a little broken because of her panting, and it was extremely flirtatious. Mo Xian's body tensed up as he increased the strength of his arms, and his warm breath heavily sprayed onto the skin beside her ear. Lil Luo, I did it. I did it. His voice was hoarse. It was as if he was restraining some kind of emotion. He restrained himself for a long, long time. He kept murmuring these 4 words. Yiqing Luo didn't quite understand what Mo Xian meant, but she could also feel the ups and downs of Mo Xian's emotions. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Her gentle voice comforted him. Mo Xian placed his head on her shoulder. Lil Luo, I promise you that I would give you the chance to grow, to give you the chance to walk side by side with me. I did it. I didn't stop you from growing. The man's light words fell into Yiqing Luo's ears. She felt as if something had touched her heart fiercely. Her eyes became misty. She tightened her grip, raised her head, and said with trembling lips, You remember? I know, the face in my mind is you. Mo Xian gazed deeply at the devastatingly beautiful face in front of him, filled with certainty. After Yiqing Luo heard that, the touch in her heart grew deeper. Her hand moved from his waist to his face. Her slender fingers gently cupped his face. Even if it was covered by half a mask, he was still as peerless as ever. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her charming eyes reflected a man's face. Her Xian did not remember the past. Xian was poisoned by the love goo. Xian, who cared about her wholeheartedly. Even in such a dangerous situation earlier, he did not make a move, just because he had promised her before. Yiqing Luo could almost imagine Xian, who had been poisoned by the love goo, had to use a lot of willpower to restrain the love goo. Yiqing Luo's nose felt a little sour. Her curly long lashes were stained with some moisture. Her pink lips rose slightly as she cupped Dmo Xian's face. Bit by bit, she tiptoed and kissed his lips. Between her lips, a young lady's soft murmur drifted into his ear. Chapter 2772. The man's heart had been disturbed by the young lady's kiss. He heard the young lady's murmuring confession again. His body suddenly tensed up, every piece of muscle smooth lines. Yiqing Luo nestled in his arms. Naturally, she could feel the changes in the man's body. She raised her brows slightly and raised her head. Then she saw the man's pair of overjoyed eyes. It wasn't hard to tell that the man's face under the mask was overjoyed and had a dazed expression. She had confessed her love to Dmo Xian quite a number of times. But this was the first time she confessed to the man who had been poisoned by the love goo, whose mind was only filled with her. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved into a smile. The long and narrow arc was full of charm. She hooked the man's collar with one hand, and her laughter was tainted with some evilness. Xian, I'm already so direct. Don't tell me. You're not going to give me any response? The man seemed to have awoken from his dream as his peach blossom eyes fixed on her face. He still had a dazed look. Yiqing Luo smiled again. Dmo Xian opened his thin lips as his peach blossom eyes were filled with joy. I love little Luo the most. The words were at the tip of his tongue. Suddenly, it stopped abruptly. Dmo Xian's pupils constricted fiercely. A strange emotion surged up in his eyes. Yiqing Luo's smile instantly froze on her face. This was the omen of the centrifugal force goo acting up. What was going on? Why did the centrifugal force goo suddenly act up? Yiqing Luo's heart sank instantly. Last Luo, he has the centrifugal force goo in his body, and you still want to arouse his love for you. The centrifugal force goo will naturally not be happy. Old Man Song's helpless voice was heard in her mind. The main purpose of the centrifugal force goo is to drive the overlord and you apart, to let him kill you personally. Just now, Dizun recalled his past with you in the form of the love goo. The battle between the consciousness of his main body and the love goo has consumed most of his energy. Now, you've made him love you even more. Yiqing Luo, she was just touched, just agitated, couldn't help but want to be intimate with his Xian. Was this wrong? Little girl, now is not the time to talk about right and wrong. Old Man Song interrupted Yiqing Luo's thoughts. This is the Miao tribe's Saintess selection ceremony, and numerous guests are watching from the side. What you should consider is how to restrain the venerable overlord of the centrifugal worm. Don't let others see the abnormality of the venerable overlord. Old Man Song's reminder made Yiqing Luo's heart sink. Right, there were so many guests around, especially in the Miao tribe's territory. Once the news of Dmo Xian being poisoned was spread out, not only would Dmo Xian suffer from a large-scale attack, the gloomy palace would definitely make use of this opportunity to make the Dharch palace fall and rise. Yiqing Luo clenched her fists tightly when she saw Dmo Xian's pair of warm and affectionate peach blossom eyes gradually turning into an unfamiliar icy chill. She abruptly raised her hand and hooked onto Dmo Xian's neck. Dmo Xian had just switched modes and had yet to react. She directly kissed his lips. Moreover, the kiss was very forceful. Dmo Xian's muffled groan could be heard faintly. It was obvious that his lips were broken. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about it, as her other hand hooked onto his neck. Dmo Xian's brows creased as he raised his hand and wanted to send this audacious young lady flying. But when his gaze fell onto that alluring face, his hand paused slightly. The delicate, soft body that was forcefully stuffed tightly clung onto his body. The young lady's fragrance seeped into his nose. Chapter 2773. This alluring face was very unfamiliar. But DMO Xian felt that it was familiar. In his mind, he automatically overlapped this face with the bold lady who had been rude to him several times before. This was Yi Luo. DMO Xian's eyes flickered slightly. His aura was about to move. The young lady's hand wrapped around his body, as if soft and boneless, hanging on his body softly. The young lady's lips were a little distance away from him. Vaguely, a trace of crystal could be seen. Yiqing Luo raised her eyes, her long and narrow eyes, deliberately dyed with a trace of poppy-like charm, smiled wickedly. "Overlord, let's talk about a deal. How about it?" The young lady's fragrance, like orchid, blended with his breath. DMO Xian faintly felt that his heart was spreading some kind of emotion, constantly gnawing at his heart, trying to avoid this complicated emotion, trying to push the young lady away. But the young lady came closer again. Their lips were almost touching. The young lady's enchanting eyebrows became more and more soul-stirring. That pair of glistening eyes, the rays of light flowed, sparkling. Just looking into her eyes, it was as if he had sunk into her charm, unable to extricate himself, and unable to control himself. DMO Xian's eyes deepened. This woman was really an evildoer who bewitched people, bewitched the masses. There had never been anyone like her who could affect his emotions, his thoughts. But she was able to break his taboo time and time again. This feeling of being affected by a woman, his emotions. It really made him unhappy. DMO Xian's eyes deepened, as if he was pondering about something, or as if he was quietly looking at something. The man's eyes were very deep, very dark. Just looking at his eyes, there was no way to tell what kind of mood he had at this moment. But even if she couldn't see his peerless beauty in full view, but just staring at his eyes, looking at his smooth lines, smooth chin, and that as if tempting her to kiss his thin lips. It was also a delightful thing to see, probably because Yiqing Luo's naked eyes stared a little too much. The man's long and narrow peach blossom eyes slightly raised a little. He chuckled. Their lips were almost touching, and she could feel his breath. Yiqing Luo's cheeks turned slightly red. However, her expression was still as charming as before. "What kind of deal? Tell me about it." DMO Xian's eyes deepened, and his voice was filled with ridicule. Seeing that the man had a reaction, Yiqing Luo moved her lips away and whispered into his ear, "Accompany me until the end of the ceremony." "Accompany you?" DMO Xian's peach blossom eyes curved as the corners of his mouth curled up, becoming more and more playful. Yiqing Luo expressed that looking at a half-covered beauty at such a close distance was really a test of her self-control. There was a smile in her voice. "Yes. What are the benefits?" DMO Xian didn't accept, but he didn't reject either. Asking like this meant that there was a chance. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up slightly as her voice hooked out a tinge of coquettishness. "After this ends, I'll be at your disposal. You can do whatever you want to me." "Anything?" DMO Xian repeated these 4 words with a smile, which didn't look like a smile. His eyes looked at her, and suddenly lowered his voice, a little rascal. "Including sleeping with you?" Yiqing Luo was stunned. She didn't expect such a serious DMO Xian to say such rascal words. Her charming eyes rose, meeting DMO Xian's peach blossom eyes, which were filled with ridicule. Chapter 2774. "Looks like you really like me." DMO Xian's voice was extremely light, without any extra emotions. Yiqing Luo expressed that this DMO Xian looked like an abstinent male god. An inviolable look. She smiled with her eyes curved, seemingly very happy. "Yes, I like you very much." The young lady didn't conceal her loving gaze. This made DMO Xian's thin lips inexplicably pulled into an arc. But the next moment, There was another inexplicable emotion that began to disturb his heart. There was a voice in his mind. It kept telling him, "Push away the young lady. Stay away from the young lady." Gradually, it formed a very powerful thought. Kill the young lady. His brows tightened, feeling a little strange about this inexplicable emotion. Obviously, he was hugging the young lady, flirting with the young lady. Under this kind of atmosphere, it was impossible to have the thought of killing the young lady. But this kind of thought really existed. His body had a strange feeling. Dmo Xian's peach blossom eyes flashed a trace of fluctuation. He once again fixed his gaze on Yiqing Luo. He wanted to find an answer from Yiqing Luo. The young lady was still smiling, a pair of sparkling eyes, as if bearing thousands of peach blossoms. Reflected in her eyes was only his shadow. For some reason, Dmo Xian had already abandoned the strange emotion in his heart. His thin lips moved, spitting out a word. "All right." As soon as he said that word, a cold light flashed in his eyes. The smile on the young lady's face became even more brilliant, like a blooming poppy releasing its most seductive power. Dmo Xian's mind moved. Suddenly his big palm covered the back of Yiqing Luo's head, lowered his head, and kissed her lips. This kiss was very affectionate, gentle, as if water could be squeezed out. Yiqing Luo almost indulged in this kind of torturous kiss. But Dmo Xian only kissed familiarity until his breath covered her layer after layer. He released her. Yiqing Luo's eyes were stained with a trace of crystal because of his kiss. He let go. Yiqing Luo's thoughts were still empty as she grabbed Dmo Xian's collar. Staring at Yiqing Luo, the man's eyes dimmed slightly, covered with a layer of desire. What a lovely little vixen. He really wanted to devour her bite by bite. However, the timing and location were both wrong. Thinking of the young girl's cunning, he smiled charmingly and said, "Including sleeping with me." Dmo Xian's expression darkened further. Forget it, since the girl wanted him to accompany her. He accompanied her. Perhaps, after obtaining her, they would feel that she was no different from other women. He wouldn't be affected by this woman anymore. Dmo Xian retracted his breath and tightened his arms, bringing her petite body into his embrace. His low and husky voice moved closer to her ear and laughed. "This is the interest. After tasting it, it's not bad. I will reluctantly agree to your deal." Yiqing Luo was still in a daze. He couldn't help but sigh. Dmo Xian's honey trap really made her unable to stop herself. However, at least he had reached an agreement with him. As long as Dmo Xian sat with her properly and finished participating in this Sana ceremony, the rest of the matter would be discussed in private. Yiqing Luo hugged his waist and buried her head in his chest. The man didn't resist, nor did he have any intention to push her away. Yiqing Luo was assured as she hugged Dmo Xian's waist and walked towards their position. Chapter 2775. No matter if it was Yiqing Luo's real identity or her real looks. Furthermore, the Overlord was present at the scene and even displayed affection with Yiqing Luo in public, breaking the rumors of abandonment. All kinds of things. All the guests who were watching were shocked. They recalled that they had previously spoken out to humiliate Yiqing Luo, belittling the imperial palace in front of the emissary of the Palace of Darkness and the Vice Palace Master. Their hearts were in their throats. However, the two people who had disturbed everyone's mind did not seem to be affected at all, and lovingly returned to his seat. He even acted as if there was no one else around, showing off his affection and feeding him food. Naturally, it was Yiqing Luo who was feeding Dmo Xian. Peach, who was sitting by the side in a daze, looked at Yiqing Luo's smiling face, peeling grapes for Dmo Xian and feeding him. Her mouth twitched. After not wearing the mask, you can let go of yourself? Just now, when he saw the two of them, the atmosphere was clearly different. His Majesty's aura had also changed. The group of them thought that Lord Di Zun was suffering from the effects of the centrifugal goo. He was about to flip out on the spot. He didn't expect to be stuffed with dog food instead. Overlord. Xiao Jin held Yin Xiao, whose expression wasn't very good, as he looked at Dmo Xian worriedly. His centrifugal force goo, will it affect? No problem. Yiqing Luo placed the grape into Dmo Xian's mouth. The man sat on the cushion lazily. His feet were slightly bent. One hand rests on the knee. He looked lazy and noble to the extreme. When Yiqing Luo's grape was brought to his lips, he lazily opened his mouth. His thin lips brushed past Yiqing Luo's fingers faintly. Yiqing Luo's fingertips trembled, but she didn't say a word as she continued to peel the grape skin while glancing sideways at Xiao Jin. The Overlord has always been honest and trustworthy. He promised me that he will accompany me till the end of the grand ceremony. So he will stay till the end of the grand ceremony. Her words were directed at Xiao Jin, but in actual fact, it was for Dmo Xian to hear. As smart as Di Zun was, how could he not understand the deeper meaning of the girl's words? He narrowed his long and narrow eyes. His thin lips curled up into an extremely shallow arc. When the girl gave him another grape, he opened his mouth and bit the girl's finger. A slight prickling pain made Yiqing Luo frown as she stared at him resentfully. Dmo Xian loosened his grip and casually shifted his gaze onto Yiqing Luo's face as he gave a casual smile. This lord is not an honest and trustworthy person. Everything depends on this lord's mood. Yiqing Luo, fine, you're the boss. Couldn't she spoil him to death? Yiqing Luo took a deep breath and smiled. Yes, I will definitely serve the Overlord well, so that the Overlord can maintain his mood. Her voice was dry and stiff. Even when he smiled, it felt like a fake smile. Xiao Jin and the others couldn't help but shiver when they heard the word concubine, rubbing their arms. However, a certain man was in a good mood and nodded with satisfaction. Yiqing Luo. After his goo worm was cured, he would definitely kneel on the washboard. Yiqing Luo suppressed the surging emotions in her heart and was about to take the grapes to serve this Buddha properly. Her peripheral vision suddenly caught a glimpse of something. Her slender brows creased as she immediately drew out her handkerchief and wiped off the grape juice on her fingers. Chapter 2776. Dmo Xian raised his brows, puzzled by Yiqing Luo's actions. Was she not going to serve him anymore? Yiqing Luo didn't look at him as she lifted her feet and walked toward a certain direction. Dmo Xian narrowed his peach blossom eyes as he slowly propped himself up. That was where Miao Yi was. At this moment, Miao Yi was standing beside the corpses of the Palace of Darkness guards, calmly commanding the Miao guards to carry the corpses. Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao stood beside her, their brows tightly furrowed as they spoke to Miao Yi. His emotions seemed to be somewhat agitated. From time to time, Miao Yi would glance sideways and respond to the two elders. Meanwhile, the two elders' faces turned uglier and uglier. He seemed to be arguing with Miao Yi about something. Yiqing Luo also saw this scene, hence, she immediately rushed over. Looking at Second Elder Miao's fawning attitude towards the Palace of Darkness just now. Later on, the Vice Palace Master of Gloomy Palace appeared. Second Elder Miao's heart was probably biased towards the Dark Nether Palace. He might even vent his anger on Miao Yi because of this. Although Miao Yi looked very calm and collected at the moment, and her way of doing things also had her own style. However, Miao Yi was only a 14 or 15-year-old girl after all, before returning to the Miao tribe. She was still that simple-minded girl who would occasionally reveal a hint of cuteness. Miao Yi had undergone such an earth-shattering change in just a month. Thinking about it, Miao Yi must have had a very hard time in the Miao tribe this month, but Yiqing Luo didn't intend to care about Miao Yi's hard work for this 1 month. After all, this was the path that Miao Yi had chosen. Become the Miao tribe leader, become the Miao tribe's holy maiden. The pressure on Miao Yi would be even greater than now. The days ahead would only be more difficult than now. These are things that Miao Yi had to bear. Before he even got close to the corpse of the Palace of Darkness guard, Second Elder Miao's angry voice rang out. Meow Yi, since you want to be the leader of the Meow tribe and become the saintess, shouldn't you prioritize the interests of the Meow tribe? Fourth Elder Meow also tried his best to persuade her. That's right, Miss Meow. You are the only direct descendant of the Meow tribe. Everything in the Meow tribe will belong to you. For the sake of the Meow tribe, it's just a small matter to her. However, this will be of great help to the Meow tribe. No. Meowie spat out the word without hesitation. Her face was cold and gloomy. He was probably annoyed by the two elders' harassment. After saying this, she turned around and was about to return to the waiting room for the selection of the Holy Maiden. Second Elder Meow immediately chased after her. Meow Yi, what do you want? Whatever conditions you have, just state them. I don't want anything. Meow Yi halted her footsteps as she decisively rejected. Second Elder Meow, I won't open my mouth to Qing Luo. She's my friend, not a tool to be used. Isn't it normal for friends to help each other? Second Elder Meow was still unwilling to give up. Meow Yi could not be bothered to say anything more to Second Elder Meow. Suddenly, he heard a sweet voice with a smile. What are you talking to me about? Meow Yi was stunned as her gaze turned towards the direction of the voice. She saw that young lady who was clad in raging flames looking at her with a light smile. Meow Yi's heart quivered slightly. Chapter 2777. Oh, Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she had some guesses in her heart, but she still asked, My matter? What matter? Second Elder Meow's attitude made Yi Qing Luo smile at a tinge of ridicule. These years, status and ability were indeed the most important. Originally, she thought that Second Elder Meow would because of the appearance of the Secluded Palace's second Palace Lord, placing all the bets on Secluded Palace. She had not expected Second Elder Meow was leaning towards her. After knowing her real identity, trying to get closer to her through Meow Yi, as expected, after hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, Second Elder Meow gave a flattering smile. Miss Yi and eldest young Miss Meow have a close relationship, so it's most suitable for eldest young Miss Meow to say it. Saying that, he stretched out his hand and pulled Meow Yi's arm, pushing her in front of Yi Qing Luo. Eldest young Miss, why are you still standing here? Didn't you have something to say to Miss Yi earlier? Meow Yi's willowy brows creased tightly as she impatiently shook off Second Elder Meow's hand. Meow Yi. Second Elder Meow warned her in a low voice as he took a careful look at Yi Qing Luo and immediately smiled. Perhaps my tone earlier was a little too heavy and made eldest young Miss unhappy. I'll leave first, Miss Yi and eldest young Miss Meow. You guys continue chatting. Saying that, he nudged fourth Elder Meow, who was standing by the side. The two of them prepared to leave. What's the matter? Yi Qing Luo looked at Meow Yi's steely green face as she laughed lightly. Between us, what else can't be said? The two elders who were leaving instantly pricked up their ears as they simultaneously slowed down their footsteps. Meow Yi pursed her lips as her expression sunk as she opened her mouth. Sorry. Why are you apologizing? Yi Qing Luo smiled gently. Meow Yi was stunned as she raised her eyes and stared blankly at Yi Qing Luo's alluring, exquisite face. Ever since Yi Qing Luo brought her back to the secret room in the Peach Blossom restaurant, Yi Qing Luo had never intentionally concealed her own identity in front of her. From the beginning in the Peach Blossom restaurant's secret room, Meow Yi already knew Yi Luo's real identity. The one who was hailed as the little hero of the West Continent. The one who saved countless of students, the female version of the miracle, Yi Qing Luo. She had heard of Yi Qing Luo's name. He had also envied Yi Qing Luo's ability. There was a time when he had fantasized about it. If only he had half of Yi Qing Luo's boldness and determination. She would not have to leave the Meow tribe, the place that belonged to her. Meow Yi knew of Yi Qing Luo's identity, but she had never asked about it. Nor was she curious about it. She knew that Yi Qing Luo treated her as a friend. That was enough. If not for Yi Qing Luo, she would still be wandering outside, unable to return to the place where she belonged. Meow Yi's eyes were a little dazed. His eyes gradually turned red. After a long while, her long eyelashes trembled, and she said in a nasal voice, "It's nothing. I just wanted to tell you that I will do my best in this sanus election." Yi Qing Luo smiled as she raised her hand and rubbed Meow Yi's furry little head. "Amen, all the best, I believe in you." Meow Yi's eyes reddened even more as she felt the warmth of a big sister's palm. Since she was young, she had never enjoyed the so-called familial love. The so-called elder sister had never given her any warmth. Today, from Yi Qing Luo's body, she could feel this warmth. Chapter 2778. She closed her cheek, feeling the warm touch. A smile gradually appeared in Meow Yi's eyes. She revealed a smile as she looked at Yi Qing Luo and nodded her head vigorously. Not far away, the two elders who were standing among the Meow tribe guards who were continuously carrying the guards of the Palace of Darkness away saw this scene. They looked at each other and smiled in satisfaction. However, in the next instant, she saw Meow Yi and Yi Qing Luo saying goodbye and turning around to leave. Second, Elder Meow's face darkened. He quickly walked over and stopped Meow Yi. "Did you say what you wanted to say? Get out of my way." Meow Yi frowned and tried to pass Second Elder Meow. However, Second Elder Meow moved to block Meow Yi and asked again, "Have you said what I asked you to say to Miss Yi?" "No." Meow Yi's voice was very calm, and her emotions did not fluctuate. "Can you move aside now? I still have to prepare for the upcoming sanus election." Meow Yi. Second Elder Meow was infuriated by her attitude and tightened his grip on Meow Yi's slender wrist. "This is all for the good of the Meow tribe. Since you're so close to her, how could she not help you with just a few words?" Meow Yi was getting impatient. The anger in Second Elder Meow's heart grew. He was about to speak. Behind him, Yi Qing Luo's cold voice floated over. "Second Elder Meow, what's going on? Is the dignified young mistress of the Meow tribe someone that a mere elder like you can drag around?" Meanwhile, a dark force hurricane struck. It brushed past Second Elder Meow's hand, which was holding Meow Yi's hand. Second Elder Meow let go of Meow Yi in pain. He raised his hand and saw that the back of his hand was already covered in blood. Just a slight movement of his finger would cause the wound that had been swept by the hurricane to reopen, and the pain was excruciating. However, Second Elder Meow did not dare to show a dark expression. He endured the pain coming from the back of his hand and smiled, nodding repeatedly. "Miss Yi is right. I have overstepped my boundaries." Yi Qing Luo raised her brows slightly as she slowly walked over. She placed a hand on Meow Yi's shoulder lazily. He leaned against Meow Yi. Their posture was intimate and natural. She tilted her head and smiled wickedly. Just now, Second Elder Meow even said that his tone towards Yi was a little harsh and made Yi unhappy. "I'm very curious, in this Meow tribe, just how much authority does an elder have?" Second Elder Meow's body stiffened and his face paled. "This, Miss Yi has misunderstood. I misunderstanding?" Yi Qing Luo's tone rose as her long and narrow eyes squinted. Yi is the Meow clan leader's only direct bloodline and is the future Meow clan leader. Furthermore, she is currently a candidate for the Holy Maiden of the Meow tribe. She has the protection of the Holy Maiden. "How dare you, an elder of the Meow tribe, disrespect Yi?" She paused for a moment before her tone suddenly became more serious. "You're tugging at Yi, and your attitude is terrible. I can't help but think deeper. Could it be that Second Elder Meow is trying to take away Yi's authority and replace her?" Second Elder Meow's face instantly turned pale. He hurriedly shook his head and anxiously explained, I didn't. I've been in the Meow tribe for decades. How could I have such thoughts? Miss Yi, please don't misunderstand." "Misunderstanding?" Yi Qing Luo's smile deepened as her charming eyes deepened. No one could tell the real meaning behind her smile. Obviously, it was a devastatingly beautiful smile. Obviously, it was a pair of alluring eyes that made one's heart flutter. But Second Elder Meow was being stared at by this pair of alluring eyes. When this smile was reflected in his eyes, he felt a chill run down his spine. Chapter 2779. Second Elder Meow felt a chill run down his spine. Wrinkles spread across his pale face. His body trembled and his voice trembled. It's my fault. I've broken the Meow tribe's rules. Yiqing Luo's fingertip tapped on Meow Yi's shoulder as she opened her mouth lazily. Future clan leader, how do you think we should punish those who break the Meow tribe's regulations? Meow Yi was stunned, not expecting Yiqing Luo to shift the topic to her. But when he met Yiqing Luo's smiling eyes, Meow Yi suddenly understood. Yiqing Luo was helping her to stabilize her position in the Meow tribe. Meow Yi's heart felt warm. This was the first time someone stood in her shoes and considered everything for her. So, Yiqing Luo knew right from the start. Why were Second Elder Meow and Fourth Elder Meow pestering her? Second Elder Meow's request was actually very simple. She only hoped that she could make use of the friendship between her and Yiqing Luo. Let Yiqing Luo step forward to show the guests that she would stand on the Meow tribe's side, becoming their backing. Because Yiqing Luo not only represented Yiqing Luo, there was also the overlord and the power of the imperial palace. As long as Yiqing Luo agreed, this was very beneficial to the future development of the Meow tribe. At least, those who wanted to take advantage of the Meow tribe's current situation to attack them and invade their territory would give up on that idea. However, Meow Yi didn't want that to happen. Yiqing Luo had helped her enough. Yiqing Luo indeed treated her extremely well, treating her like a younger sister. But she couldn't be insatiable just because Yiqing Luo treated her well. Moreover, it had always been Yiqing Luo who had been sacrificing for her. As for her, she had never done anything for Yiqing Luo. How could she possibly make use of their friendship to make Yiqing Luo open her mouth? The minute Yiqing Luo announced in public, she would become the backing of the Meow tribe. It meant that in the future, he would be involved with the Meow tribe. Meow Yi wasn't willing to push her own burden onto Yiqing Luo. Because of this, Meow Yi had always refused. But now, Yiqing Luo used her own way to express her attitude. It wasn't a big publicity. Instead, he used his actions to show it. Yiqing Luo was teaching her to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, stabilizing his position in the Meow tribe. It was also a good opportunity to show that she, Meow Yi, was not someone to be trifled with. On Meow Yi's face, the first time she met Yiqing Luo surfaced that radiant and innocent smile. Yiqing Luo had already helped her to such an extent. Then, she would have to walk on her own, one step at a time. Meow Yi's eyes firmly looked at Yiqing Luo. Soon after, the smile on his face slowly disappeared. I'm afraid Second Elder has been in a high position for far too long, Meow Yi said, her voice icy cold. You no longer consider yourself to be Second Elder. Second Elder Meow shuddered and knelt in front of Meow Yi with a thud. When Fourth Elder Meow saw this, he immediately knelt down. Meow Yi's expression was calm, without a hint of panic. She looked down at Second Elder Meow and continued, nothing can be accomplished without rules. Second Elder Meow should know the Meow tribe's rules better than anyone else. This person who broke the Meow tribe's rules, how to deal with him. Second Elder Meow should be clearer than anyone else. Young miss, spare me, spare me. Chapter 2780. According to the rules, Second Elder Meow offended her superiors and had the intention to replace me. She should be directly stripped of her status as an elder and sent to the Goo Garden to be reduced to a Goo slave. Meow Yi enunciated each and every word in a calm tone. When he heard the words Goo slave, Second Elder Meow's face was ashen. Goo Garden, that was the place where Meow tribe's goo worms were abundant. As for Goo slaves, it wasn't just to raise those goo worms. Moreover, every time a new goo worm was researched, the Goo slave would become the test subject of the goo worm. If they were lucky, they could survive, and because of the new goo worm, they could develop the latent energy in their bodies. If he was unlucky, he would be devoured by the new goo worm. That was the place that all the Meow tribe members fear the most. He looked at second Elder Meow and fourth Elder Meow's pale faces. Yiqing Luo laughed softly. She tilted her head and leaned against Meow Yi's shoulder. Her voice was extremely lazy. This punishment is not bad. Meow Yi smiled as well. Her confidence grew as well. She was about to continue speaking. However, the slender and soft fingers on his shoulder suddenly knocked gently. Meow Yi was stunned as she realized that Yiqing Luo had something to tell her. She glanced sideways. Yiqing Luo didn't say anything, only smiling faintly. There seemed to be some sort of emotion hidden in those deep and beautiful eyes. Meow Yi's eyes narrowed. Suddenly, he seemed to have understood something. She shifted her gaze again, and when she looked at second Elder Meow, the flames on her body had already gradually calmed down. She lowered her eyes and looked at the elder kneeling in front of her, but Meow Yi purposely dragged out her last syllable. These two words seemed to give second Elder Meow hope. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Meow Yi. However, second Elder Meow is an elder of the Meow tribe, after all. You have worked diligently for the Meow tribe for decades. The corners of Meow Yi's mouth curled into a faint smile. Seeing that second Elder Meow has a good attitude in admitting his mistake, I can pretend that your rudeness towards me did not happen. But if there's a next time, there will be no next time. There will be no next time. There will be no next time. Second Elder Meow's anxious and uneasy heart felt much more at ease the moment he heard Meow Yi's tone. With a pale face, he repeatedly promised that he wouldn't dare to do it again. Meow Yi widened her smile in satisfaction. At this moment, the finger on Meow Yi's shoulder moved again. Shortly after, the soft and delicate body that was attached to Meow Yi's body slowly pulled away. This time, Meow Yi understood without the slightest bit of hesitation. She took the initiative to help the two elders up and said, "Elders, please don't kneel. In the future, the Meow tribe will still need the help of the two of you. A slap in the face, and then a carrot." This was the message that Yiqing Luo transmitted to her. Yiqing Luo was extremely satisfied with Meow Yi's way of doing things. She raised her hand and stroked Meow Yi's head again. The dignified look on Meow Yi's face immediately faded away as she resumed a young lady's radiant smile. She raised her head and looked at Yiqing Luo. "Qing Luo, thank you. All right, hurry up and prepare. We've been delayed by the secluded palace for such a long time. If we drag on any longer, the sky will turn dark." Yiqing Luo placed both her hands on Meow Yi's shoulder, pushing her towards the direction of the Meow tribe's inner region. Chapter 2781. Meow Main Building. In a long corridor on the second floor stood two figures. This position coincidentally allowed them to have a panoramic view of the entire plaza. Standing slightly in front was a lady dressed in simple meow meow clothing. Her facial features were exquisite and gentle like water. There were some wrinkles at the corner of her eyes, and she looked to be around 30 years old. The lady's gaze followed Meow Yi closely until Meow Yi's figure disappeared around the corner before she retracted her gaze. The lady's delicate brows creased. Eldest young Miss Meow's change is really huge. Behind the lady was an elderly dressed in a white long robe. He had white brows, white hair, and a white beard. His figure was slightly plump, and he looked very benevolent. The elderly stroked his white beard. This is all because of that young lady named Yiqing Luo who changed eldest young Miss Meow. He paused for a moment as his white brows curved, filled with smiles. Eldest young Miss Meow, being able to grow up is a good thing for the Meow tribe. The lady remained silent for a moment as she nodded her head faintly. Soon after, his gaze was fixed on the extremely dazzling young girl with a face that could topple cities. After some time, her red lips moved slightly as she spoke softly. "Let's go. The Sacred Maiden selection is about to begin." We should go meet this lady who can change eldest young Miss Meow. Let's see how much magical power she has. Meow Tri Plaza. Yiqing Luo sent Meow Yi off with her eyes. She then took small steps back to DMO Xian's side. She had just gotten close when she sensed that there was a kind of frosty, cold air flowing in the air. Yiqing Luo's footsteps paused as she looked at DMO Xian, who was still maintaining his original sitting posture. That half mask which she personally made had concealed the emotions on his face. But Yiqing Luo acutely sensed the chilliness emitting from DMO Xian's body. He was in a bad mood? Who was it who had offended this great Buddha? Yiqing Luo looked suspiciously at the few people beside DMO Xian. The few people who had been sitting next to her before she left her seat had now all obediently moved away from her and moved to the side. On the left and right, there was at least a space of 3 seats. Only the overlord was left as he bent his knees on the soft cushion, displaying his elegance. Peach and Xiao Jin, who came into contact with Yiqing Luo's puzzled gaze, spread out their hands as they shrugged their shoulders in confusion. Just as Yiqing Luo and Peach's eyes met, transmitting the message. Suddenly, the man's cold and deep voice came in her ears. "Why are you still standing there?" Yiqing Luo shivered in fright from his voice. Her fingers unconsciously curled up a little. Earlier, when he was in front of Meow Yi, whatever overbearing aura, indolent enchanting, in front of DMO Xian, had all disappeared. She laughed dryly as she moved her feet and returned to DMO Xian's side to sit down, not waiting for DMO Xian to speak. She had already spontaneously put her head into DMO Xian's arms. The man's aura was very cold, but his embrace was still very warm. "What? Now that you know you're in the wrong, you're here to please me?" The man lowered his eyes and asked with a sneer. Yiqing Luo arched her head. The man's sandalwood scent lingered around her nose. She stretched out her arms and hugged his waist. In his arms, she raised her little head and smiled like a cat who had successfully stolen food. "Wrong? Fawn? I'm the one who made the overlord unhappy." DMO Xian's pupils contracted slightly, not knowing why, when he saw the young lady's satisfied smile. His heart had a long-lost warmth. Chapter 2782. The young lady didn't know DMO Xian's emotions were in turmoil. Her brows were still curved as she smiled sweetly, and her voice was soft as though water could be squeezed out. "I wonder what I did to make the overlord angry?" DMO Xian's eyes were slightly gloomy as he stared at her quietly, as though he wanted to stare into her soul. Yiqing Luo smiled even more wantonly. Her hands were also on DMO Xian's waist, moving up and down, constantly taking advantage of him. There was no sign of her admitting her mistake and trying to please him. Yiqing Luo. Suddenly, DMO Xian's large palm clasped onto the little hand that was caressing his waist. His pupils were deep. "In public, if you don't want to put on a show, then let go." Yiqing Luo's hand paused as the complacent expression on her face disappeared. Damn it! While DMO Xian was poisoned by the centrifugal venom, he definitely wouldn't have that kind of reaction towards her. Touching him all over, touching all the muscles that she didn't dare to touch previously. Because if it was in the past, she simply wanted to touch DMO Xian's firm muscles to feel what it felt like. In the end, there were only 2 possibilities. It was very likely that, not only did she not touch his muscles, she would also be eaten clean without any residue left. Or perhaps, on one hand, she was eaten clean, and on the other hand, she was forced to touch his muscles until she was afraid to see his muscles. No matter what the outcome was, Yiqing Luo expressed that she didn't want to experience it. So, she specially touched him now, and even if DMO Xian forgot about her and left her heart, but he was after all a man, she couldn't play happily anymore. Yiqing Luo retracted her hand resentfully, but her mouth was still very thick-skinned. "I'm trying to please the overlord and admit my mistake." "So, Messia's way of admitting your mistake is to sleep with me?" DMO Xian raised his brows as his voice faintly revealed a chill. Yiqing Luo inexplicably felt a little cold. even when she was leaning against Dmo Xian's arms. That chill was constantly surging into his skin. Yiqing Luo's pupils were slightly stunned as she quickly reacted and laughed. She suppressed the lingering cold air around her, and her hands were not afraid of death as she hugged Dmo Xian's waist once again. Moreover, it was extremely bold. She reached into his wide silver robe and wrapped her arms around his sturdy waist. Her little face was pressed against his chest. Glancing at Dmo Xian with a faint smile, she gazed at his face. "Io, the only person who can make me admit my mistake and coax is only you, the Overlord. The only person I want to sleep with is only you, the Overlord." When she said this, she even deliberately used that extremely coquettish Taiwanese accent. She could be said to be an expert at acting spoiled. Dmo Xian's thin lips were slightly pursed, his gaze deep as he gazed deeply at her face. He did not say a word, and his expression was indifferent. This reaction made Yiqing Luo not know what to do. Could it be that Dmo Xian wasn't jealous? Was he unhappy with the way she apologized and tried to please him? She had made her feelings very clear. What was he still upset about? Yiqing Luo expressed. A man's heart was even more difficult to fathom than a needle at the bottom of the sea. Stop crying. Lord D. Zun is angry. How can I coax him? It was quite urgent. Yiqing Luo was still racking her brains, thinking of ways to coax her man. Suddenly, a man wearing a mask appeared in her eyes. The man's face was half revealed, and his elegant face was reflected in her eyes. Yiqing Luo was stunned and just wanted to open her mouth. Her lips were forcefully sealed by the man. Chapter 2783. This what was going on? Wasn't he angry? Why did he suddenly kiss her? Yiqing Luo's mind was in a mess. She couldn't resist the temptation from Dmo Xian. Very quickly, Yiqing Luo was thrown into disarray. Until she was released, she was lying in Dmo Xian's arms. Her ear was stuck tightly to his heart. Her heart was beating very fast. Her mind was filled with the thump, thump, thump sound. But where her ear was stuck, the heartbeat was extremely calm, without any ripples or waves. As though the kiss earlier was just a casual action, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. Yiqing Luo's thumping heart at this moment stopped beating. Her emotions disappeared very quickly. The lady's shyness also disappeared very quickly. This change naturally did not escape Dmo Xian's eyes. The brows under the mask slightly thickened. Dmo Xian's eyes sunk. His voice was still very cold. Why? Tired of this lord's kiss? The world's peerless beauty. Only the Overlord. How could I be tired of the Overlord's kiss? Yiqing Luo's delicate body pulled a distance away from Dmo Xian. She half propped up, only her upper body, leaning into Dmo Xian's arms. 3,000 black hair pouring down. It looked extremely lazy. She raised her head, for eyes and Dmo Xian, level, looked at each other. The Overlord took the initiative to kiss me. Does it mean you have forgiven me? She raised one arm. The wide robe slid down to the wrist. Half of the skin, as white as jade, was revealed, revealing half of the skin, the fair as jade arm. Her hand circled around Dmo Xian's neck, and immediately her delicate body came closer to his arms. The distance between the two of them narrowed again. Almost it was nose aimed at nose. But this kind of closeness made Dmo Xian's brows creased even tighter. His eyes dimmed, although the young lady in front was close to him. But the smile on the young lady's face was obviously too fake. It was just like the mask she wore when she was in front of others. To him, it was no different to others. This kind of thinking made Dmo Xian's heart sink. Obviously, just now, she was still in his arms, soft as water. The more Dmo Xian thought, the more vexed he felt. Such emotions overflowed. It was impossible for Yiqing Luo not to feel it. But Yiqing Luo had no intention to open her mouth. She knew that when Dmo Xian kissed her, Other than the man's most direct reaction, he did not have any feelings of love towards her. That was because of the centrifugal force goo in his body. But even if he knew, while she was being kissed passionately, but he didn't have the slightest reaction, she still felt rather sad. After the selection of the saintess, she must let Yi cure DMO Xian's poison as soon as possible. You're angry. The man's deep voice floated over her. His long arm suddenly reached out and wrapped around her slender waist. Yi Qing Luo's half-propped-up body suddenly pounced forward. She fell into his firm embrace. The man's scorching breath hit her in the face. Since you like my kiss, why are you still angry after being kissed? He bent down and touched his nose to hers. Their lips were separated by less than a finger. But he did not kiss her. A pair of sparkling peach blossom eyes stared deeply into her eyes. Chapter 2784. DMO Xian knew that the young lady's words were just to brush him off. The girl didn't want to tell him the reason why she was angry. He didn't pursue the matter any further. After all, he was only slightly interested in this young lady. The girl didn't want to talk about it. He was too lazy to ask any further. DMO Xian did not ask. Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered to say anymore. The eyes of the surrounding guests all fell on the two of them. He saw the sweetness between the two of them. He had to admit it. The man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. When they were put together, no matter what they did, it was so pleasing to the eye. Even though it was a public kiss in the eyes of the crowd, they still couldn't bear to spoil it, because it was such a beautiful scene. This was a society that only cared about appearances. He was good-looking. Most of the time, they were easily forgiven. After this episode, the Holy Maiden selection of the Miao tribe had finally begun. Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao's attitude towards Miao Yi had obviously changed after the beating just now. It was not just these two elders. It was the same for the rest of the Miao tribe. After all, Yi Qing Luo's attitude towards Miao Yi earlier, although he didn't say anything, but anyone could tell that Yi Qing Luo was supporting Miao Yi. Yi Qing Luo's backing represented the overlord's backing. What's more, Yi Qing Luo was the little hero of the West Continent, the elder sister of the current patriarch of the Three Springs sect. He was also the benefactor of many academies. Various identities all indicated that. Yi Qing Luo was a master who could not be offended. He wanted to please Yi Qing Luo. Naturally, they had to start from the people around Yi Qing Luo. Because of this, Miao Yi was not obstructed by anyone during the selection process of the Miao tribe. Including Miao Yi, there were a total of 8 women participating in the selection. The oldest was 17 years old. The youngest was 11 years old. They were all women of the Miao tribe who were extremely talented in Gu techniques. Before the saintess selection began, Yi Qing Luo specially spoke out and said a sentence. The greatest respect towards the opponent is to go all out. So, there's no need to worry about Miao Yi's status. Just compete however you want. Yi Qing Luo had already said this sentence. How could the other saintess candidates dare to go easy on him? If he went easy, it would be disrespectful to Miao Yi. Disrespecting Miao Yi was equivalent to disrespecting Yi Qing Luo. Disrespecting Yi Qing Luo was disrespecting the overlord. This complicated relationship was involved. Who could bear the consequences? Yi Qing Luo's words were beneficial to Miao Yi. Miao Yi was able to subdue the ancient Gu king, so her strength was obvious. She didn't need her opponent to go easy on her. Moreover, if Miao Yi really became the Miao tribe's holy maiden, Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong's henchmen might make a big fuss about it. For example, Miao Yi could become the holy maiden of the Miao tribe. He merely relied on Yi Qing Luo's help. As for the other sacred maiden candidates, they were afraid of offending Yi Qing Luo and intentionally lost to Miao Yi. Even if Miao Yi relied on her own strength, no one would believe it. He would also be accused of being unjustifiable, whereas Yi Qing Luo had already made things clear before the selection. This would also indirectly block the schemes of Miao Yixiong and Miao Rongrong's henchmen. The truth had proven that Yi Qing Luo's guess was not wrong. Miao Yi's strength had far exceeded her expectations. The reason why the Miao tribe could survive to this day was because of the Miao tribe's poison. Chapter 2785. Towards goo worms. Miao Yi, who had contracted the king of venomous worms, was naturally not unfamiliar with them. No matter if it was the first round of distinguishing goo worms, or the second round of analyzing the goo worm's nurturing and the method to neutralize it, or the third round of intimate contact with goo worms, Miao Yi had done extremely well. Her performance could be described as eye-catching and breathtaking. Even elders who were originally extremely anxious couldn't help but stood up and clap their hands. One must know how much pressure they were under just to sit here as the judges. Everyone knew that Miao Yi had been left outside by the previous clan leader since young. Unlike Miao Rongrong, who was the future sacred maiden whom the previous clan leader had meticulously nurtured. Plus Miao Rongrong's enmity towards Miao Yi. Miao Yi had been a Miao Miao for the past 10 over years, so she had no way to come into contact with anything related to goo worms. Later on, Miao Yi left Miao Miao tribe. Now, Miao Yi had just returned to Miao Miao tribe for a month. Even though Miao Yi had been trying her best to absorb the knowledge related to goo worms in this 1 month. But it was impossible for her to pass the Sacred Maiden selection safely in a short period of 1 month. The elders judging were afraid that Miao Yi would not be able to pass the test. Coupled with Yi Qing Luo's early warning, the other candidates didn't dare to go easy on Miao Yi, causing Miao Yi to fail and leave the competition, thus offending Yi Qing Luo. Their hearts had always been restless, until Miao Yi's breathtaking performance. They finally put their hearts at ease. Miao Yi's performance. The other candidates didn't need to go easy at all. Miao Yi was able to pass the test easily and safely. While they were stunned, they were also curious. What method did Miao Yi use to be able to understand everything related to goo worms clearly in 1 month's time? After 3 rounds of selection, 8 candidates, there were only 3 left. Miao Yi's performance was without a doubt the best. By this time, the sky had already turned dark. The elder judging looked at the pitch-black sky and was about to say something. Suddenly, a female attendant walked up with a letter and passed it to the elder judging. After the elder judging saw the contents of the letter, his expression changed slightly as his gaze subconsciously shot towards the Miao tribe main building's long corridor. But there wasn't a single figure there. The judging elder shifted his gaze to Miao Yi. After hesitating for a moment, under everyone's gaze, he said word by word, "The last stage of the Saintess selection is tonight. Tomorrow, you'll have to raise a goo insect." He paused for a moment before continuing. According to the quality of the goo worms raised, the candidates who can enter the Saintess realm and accept the ancient goo worms examination will be determined. When the judging elder announced the rules of the 4th round, everyone burst into an uproar. Especially the people of the Miao tribe, they were all stunned. Everyone knew a good quality goo worm needed time to nurture. Tonight, or tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Which meant that for now, until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, in such a short period of time, he managed to raise a good quality goo worm. Was this a joke? After reading the rules of the last round, the judging elder's expression was a little strange. The judging elder nudged him. Since when was there a rule for the 4th round? That judging elder's face was pale as he shook his head at him. Shortly after, he passed the letter in his hand over. After the curious judging elder saw the handwriting on the letter, he revealed the same expression as him. The Miao tribe members looked at each other. Chapter 2786. The remaining 2 Saintess candidates had been raised as future Saintesses since they were young. Since birth, they had been immersed in goo worms and goo skills. Even they had no way to nurture a goo worm of good quality in just a few hours. Looking at the past Sacred Maiden selections, Miao tribe had never had such a weird rule. Why was it only this time? But there was an additional difficult round? The two Sacred Maiden candidates looked at each other in dismay. The expressions on their faces were dark and extremely ugly. Meow Tribe's women all wanted to become the Sacred Maiden. They naturally wanted it too, although Meow Yi was the direct descendant of Meow Tribe leader. And she had Yi Qing Luo and the Overlord behind her. But didn't Yi Qing Luo say it earlier? Everything depended on ability? In their hearts, there was still a little bit of hope. As long as they used their own ability to surpass Meow Yi and become the Meow Tribe's Sacred Maiden. Even if Yi Qing Luo was finding trouble for Meow Yi, she would definitely be drowned by the rumors and slanders. Not only would she throw away her own face, the Overlord's reputation would also be tarnished. After all, there were so many guests present, and they were all witnesses. But all the luck, after the judging elder announced the additional round's rule, was completely shattered. Just at this moment, at the guest seating area, a rough man's voice was heard from the back. "I told you, there's something wrong with this Meow Yi. Looks like the judging elder also saw that there's something wrong with Meow Yi, so he set up this fourth round of selection. Brother Young is right," someone echoed, and his voice was loud and clear, as though he couldn't wait for everyone in the public square to hear his words. Who in the entire Meow Tribe doesn't know Meow Yi's ability? She had never come into contact with any goo skills or goo worms, so how could she possibly answer those questions? The second round's goo worm rearing method and antidote method, even us Meow clansmen don't know about it. She is someone who had never come into contact with goo worms, but not only did she answer it, she answered it so professionally, as though she had reared those goo worms and antidote those goo worms. From what I see, some people, in order to let Meow Yi become the Sacred Maiden, got all the Sacred Maiden selection questions and made Meow Yi memorize them all. After this sentence was uttered, a storm was set off in the entire square. The more the Meow tribesmen thought about it, the more they felt that this person's words made sense. Everyone knew that Meow Yi's situation in the Meow tribe was at most a little better than a goose slave. Meow Rong Rong didn't want to give Meow Yi any chance to come into contact with the goo worms. So, Meow Yi's performance in the Saintess selection was stunning. The reason was he knew the topic of the Saintess selection in advance. That made sense. That person who got the question, everyone instinctively shifted their gazes onto Yi Qing Luo and DMO Xian once again. Apart from these two people, they couldn't think of anyone else who could get the Meow tribe's Holy Maiden selection. It seemed like what these people had said was true. The judging elders found out that Meow Yi had cheated. But due to the presence of Yi Qing Luo and the Overlord, they didn't dare to expose him on the spot, so they stayed at the fourth round to maintain the Meow tribe's fairness. If that was the case, everything would make sense. Chapter 2787. On the stage, the faces of the two Saintess candidates who stood side by side with Meow Yi immediately darkened after hearing the crowd's discussion. They looked at each other, then at Meow Yi. On the young and beautiful face, her eyebrows were tightly furrowed. It was obvious that she was unhappy. So the judges added an extra round of selection because you cheated. Meow Zhilian, a candidate who was about 14 years old, gritted her teeth in anger. The Saintess, Meow Shuadon, who was about 17 years old and looked rather mature, pulled Meow Zhilian's sleeve, signaling her to stop talking. Meow Zhilian was still angry, but she knew that she could not vent her anger on Meow Yi. He and Meow Shuadon stood to the side. He distanced himself from Meow Yi. Meow Yi stood there alone. Her slender figure was very frail. She did not move. She didn't move at all when the guests were talking and pointing at her. Even the expression on his face did not change much. Below the selection stage, Yi Qing Luo's brows creased tightly, even though Meow Yi hid it well. But Yi Qing Luo could still see the fluster in the depths of her eyes. After all, Meow Yi had never encountered such a thing before. No matter how early he matured, be sensible at a young age. She was only a little girl, less than 15 years old, facing everyone's suspicions and distrust. No matter how she tried to explain, it would seem so weak and powerless. No one would believe it. Yi Qing Luo's gaze swept past the few rows at the back, where they were still leading the rhythm, discussing incessantly. Those are Miao Rongrong's henchmen. Peach explained, Miao Rongrong has fallen from power, and Miao Yixiong has been stripped of his position as clan leader. If he takes over, they will be the first to be eradicated. Yi Qing Luo nodded in understanding. The Miao tribe did not allow their tribesmen to leave the tribe without permission. If these people escaped from the Miao tribe, they would also be hunted down by the Miao tribe. Therefore, Miao Rongrong's henchmen wanted to survive. He could only think of ways to stop Miao Yi from becoming the holy maiden of the Miao tribe. As long as Miao Yi fell, they would then bring out a new Miao tribe leader or saintess. They still had a chance to survive. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as a chilly glint flashed past her eyes. She had yet to speak. Miao Rongrong's henchmen were the first to find trouble, because Miao Rongrong's henchmen, while setting the tempo, had been paying attention to Yi Qing Luo's reaction. He caught a glimpse of Yi Qing Luo's gaze. His eyes were hazy, causing people to shudder. The man's rough voice rang out loud and clear. Lady Yi, am I not speaking the truth? Why are you looking at us like that? Are you trying to silence me? Someone at the side immediately followed up. Kill them to silence them? Everyone present knew that Miao Yi had cheated. Are you going to kill all of us? Miss Yi, Miao Yi's cheating has something to do with you. Our Miao tribe's holy maiden selection is such a sacred matter, but you used such a method to disturb the sanctity of my Miao tribe. What exactly are you thinking? Very quickly, Miao Rongrong's henchmen pointed all the spearheads towards Yi Qing Luo. It was just a few simple sentences. He had easily provoked the anger of the Miao tribesmen. For the Miao tribe, the holy maiden of the Miao tribe was their faith. The Miao tribe's holy maiden selection was the most sacred matter. But Yi Qing Luo used such a method to destroy the fairness of the holy maiden selection. Chapter 2788. Miao Rongrong's henchmen were still hooting. The Miao tribesmen's emotions were also stirred up. The scene was out of control. Even the Miao tribesmen went up to pacify them. The Miao tribesmen were waving their arms and shouting. They needed an explanation from the person who revealed the selection questions. They needed Yi Qing Luo to give them an explanation. The onlookers were the guests from the other continents. It wasn't convenient for them to say anything now. Now, the Miao tribesmen were extremely agitated because their beliefs had been blasphemed. If they opened their mouths, it would be easy for them to direct the fire onto themselves. The scene made Miao Rongrong's henchmen and the rest revealed a complacent smile. Suddenly, someone in the crowd started to shout, Miao Yi, step down! Miao Yi, step down! The deafening slogans gave the Miao tribesmen a chance to vent their frustrations. One by one, they started to shout along with the slogan. The lady who was standing on the stage faced the hooting and cursing of the crowd. Her exquisite little face turned pale bit by bit. Her petite figure was trembling slightly. A pair of lively eyes stared blankly at the tribesmen below. Everyone's hooting and cursing were reflected in her pupils. No matter how strong she was, no matter how mentally prepared she was. But when she saw this scene, it made Miao Yi's strong heart start to show signs of collapse. She had obviously relied on her own hard work to get to where she was now. Why was it that no one was willing to believe her? The lady's slender figure started to bend down under the pressure. She wanted to curl up. She wanted to hug herself and stay away from all the doubts. Miao Yi's performance didn't make the Miao tribesmen feel any sympathy. On the contrary, the hooting became louder and louder. Hey, you said I gave the sacred maiden selection questions to Yi to cheat. Do you have any evidence? Just at this moment, a cold voice leisurely suppressed all the cursing and hooting. Following that, they saw the red-robed young lady who was sitting in the first row lazily supporting herself on the man's shoulder as she stood up. His red robe cascaded down like a raging fire in high spirits. The young lady's gorgeous face had a trace of indifference and laziness. It was just such a lazy posture. But for some reason, it made the pressure in the air to become extremely heavy. Meow Rongrong's henchmen's smug smiles froze on their faces. The powerful pressure made it extremely difficult for them to breathe. The square instantly fell silent. Only the girls' lazy laughter could be heard. It was like a feather that swept through everyone's hearts. You brought this matter to my ears. If there is no evidence, I will be very angry. The girl's voice carried a hint of a smile, as well as the unique sweetness of this girl. After all, what I hate the most is being the scapegoat. Meow Rongrong's henchmen felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies trembled. After a long time, he finally found his voice again, and with a choking voice, he forced himself to mutter, "'Tis, what other evidence is there even in need for? This is something that the entire Meow tribe knows about, apart from you. Who else could possibly have the means to help Meow cheat? With just a mouth? Then, can I say that? You are also cooperating with that young lady to cheat in the Sacred Maiden selection?" Yiqing Luo smiled as she pointed at Meow Julien, smiling contentedly. Chapter 2789. Venomous Slander? Yiqing Luo smiled calmly. I'm very curious. Those people who looked to be in their 30s or 40s had personally said that there were several types of goo poison in the second round of the Sacred Maiden selection. Even they didn't know the method to nurture and cure it. So how did a 14-year-old young lady like you manage to answer it? Yiqing Luo pointed at those people who were Meow Rongrong's henchmen as her eyes curved into a smile. So I also suspect if you had colluded with those people to get hold of the Sacred Maiden selection questions in advance, and then made those people intentionally shift the suspicion of cheating onto E to confuse the public. Yiqing Luo's words were spoken word by word. Her tone was very certain. Yiqing Luo's aura was originally strong. He acted as if he was serious, and the words he said made people believe him. Meow Julien's face instantly turned red as her eyes turned red. You're spouting nonsense. I've been familiar with the art of goo since young, so naturally I'm clear about it. I'm different from Meow that trash who was born without a father to teach her. Meow Julien was still young. She had been nurtured as a Sacred Maiden candidate since young. Naturally, she was proud and arrogant. How could she tolerate Yiqing Luo's slander? She was so infuriated that she lost all rationality as she started to ramble. Meow cheated, and you want to drag me down with you? What evidence do you have to say that I cheated? On what basis do you say that I cheated? Just based on the fact that you have the Overlord? Without the Overlord, who do you think you are? Meow Julien's words made Meow Shui Dan, who was standing by the side, flung her hand away as she shrunk to one side. Yiqing Luo was obviously protecting Meow Yiqing Luo was obviously going against Meow Julien. If she helped Meow Julien, she might get into trouble. The moment she was abandoned by Meow Shui Dan, Meow Julien regained some rationality. She recalled what she had said earlier. Her face turned pale instantly. Subconsciously, she looked towards the direction of her parents. But her own family had all averted their gazes. Apparently, they had decided to give up on her. Meow Julien's heart seemed to be pressed down by something fiercely, making her unable to breathe. Moreover, Yiqing Luo didn't give her a chance to breathe. What evidence? Since they don't think it's necessary, then there's no need for it. Yiqing Luo smiled as she tilted her head, as she looked towards the direction of Meow Rongrong's henchmen. After all, don't you Meow people believe that as long as you open your mouth, everything is the truth? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Immediately, the clamoring clansmen calmed down. They looked at Meow Julien, then at Meow Following that, he turned his head back and took a look at Meow Rongrong's henchmen and looked at Yiqing Luo. For a moment, he didn't know who to trust. Yiqing Luo's smile was very faint, without any fluctuation of emotions. But, other than your Meow tribe's simple-minded folkways, there's another point which is worth me to ponder over. She raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were like torches as she stared at the selection platform, at the two elders who had ugly expressions on their faces. She enunciated each word clearly. You Meow tribesmen don't trust your own elders, so why go through so much trouble to organize the sacred maiden selection ceremony? The faces of the Meow tribesmen darkened. The judging elder could no longer sit still. He stood up and was about to speak. Chapter 2790. She raised her slender brows, and with her gorgeous looks, her smile was beautiful but cold. The sacred maiden selection is to your Meow tribe. They should be clearer than you on how sacred it is. Yi Qing Luo's interrogative words came one after another. All the Meow tribe's tribesmen turned silent. These Meow tribe's tribesmen were unable to leave the Meow tribe's territory because of the tribe rules. As a person, they were naturally more innocent. Just a few words, and she was able to influence their thoughts. Meow Rongrong's henchman could do it. So could she. Looking at Meow Rongrong's henchman and the others' ashen expressions, Yi Qing Luo's smile deepened. The few Meow tribe's elders' faces turned green and white. Yi Qing Luo's words made their faces turn red. They wanted to refute. But Yi Qing Luo's words were the truth. Only when Yi Qing Luo said in front of so many guests, she exposed the internal discord in the Meow tribe, easily provoking the trust. They felt embarrassed and annoyed. The Meow tribe's elders all knew that those who started the rhythm were Meow Rongrong's henchmen. They also knew why those who started the rhythm would intentionally disrupt the sacred maiden selection. But they had to admit, after those people raised Meow Yi's doubts, even they themselves started to doubt whether Meow Yi had cheated or not. This kind of thinking, after Yi Qing Luo brought it out in the open, it made them feel ashamed. You're just pestering endlessly. Meow Rongrong's henchmen and the others were unreconciled as they gritted their teeth. We have nothing to do with Meow Julien. Yi Qing Luo, the more you confuse the public, the more I suspect that trash Meow Yi to pass the first 3 rounds of the sacred maiden selection. Yi Qing Luo laughed lightly. Whether she has anything to do with it or not, it's not for you to say but me. The smile on her brows was enchanting, but it revealed an obvious chill. If I show the evidence that Yi didn't cheat, then can you show the evidence that Meow Julien didn't cheat? Meow Rongrong's henchmen and the others were stunned as their faces revealed a suspicious expression. Evidence? What evidence could they show? They hesitated. Yi Qing Luo became overbearing. Why? Don't dare? Are you afraid that the matter of you slandering the Holy Maiden candidate will be exposed and punished by the Holy Maiden? Or are you afraid that the matter of you secretly colluding with Meow Julien will be proven? Yi Qing Luo's voice was very leisurely, with a slight smile. Clear and sweet like a silver bell, pearls and jade falling on a plate. No matter how one listened to it, it was extremely comforting. However, everyone felt that the ruthlessness in that voice seemed to be able to drag them into an ice house with a wave of his hand. Meow Rongrong's henchmen were so frightened by the invisible chill that they forgot to retort. And this hesitation. This made the Meow clansmen as well as the guests to confirm the truth of Yi Qing Luo's words. Meow Julien was so angry that she burst into tears on the spot. Nonsense. I didn't cheat. I did not collude with those people. I don't even know that group of people. Meow Julien's exasperation was a stark contrast to Meow Yi's calm and elegant demeanor. The elders of the Meow tribe could not help but think. From the very beginning, when Meow Yi was condemned and questioned by everyone, Meow Yi had never opened her mouth to defend herself even once. She stood there with a calm expression. Her back was straight. Her gaze was extremely determined. Chapter 2791. The 2 judging elders looked at each other and nodded their heads. Following that, they looked towards Yi Qing Luo's direction at the same time. One of the judging elders stood up, since there are tribesmen who questioned the sacred maiden selection's fairness. Then, in order to ensure the sacred maiden selection's fairness and holiness, I am willing to accept Miss Ye's suggestion. The other judging elder also stood up. I wonder what evidence does Miss Ye have to prove that eldest young Miss Meow did not cheat. If Yi's innocence is proven, how do you intend to deal with that bunch of people? Yi Qing Luo gave a meaningful smile as she shot a glance at Miao Rongrong's henchman and asked with a light smile. The judging elder was an astute person as he immediately slapped the table. The Sacred Maiden candidates are protected by the ancient Gu King of the Miao tribe. If eldest young Miss Miao's innocence is proven, those people are scheming to slander the Sacred Maiden candidates, disrespecting the Sacred Maiden and the Miao tribe. I will definitely punish them severely. Punish? Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes. The severe punishment that elder mentioned, to what extent will it be? This. The judging elder didn't expect Yi Qing Luo to ask this question as he muttered to himself for a moment. What does Miss Yi think? Should be done? They're slandering Yi. If it is proven that Yi is innocent and did not cheat, then these people should be handed over to Yi to deal with. The rest of the Miao tribe are not allowed to interfere. Yi Qing Luo spoke with a matter-of-fact look. These words sounded reasonable, but if one listened carefully, it was indeed overbearing and unreasonable. Miao Rongrong's henchmen and the rest, even if Miao Rongrong and Miao Yixiong had fallen, they were after all the Miao tribe's tribesmen. According to Yi Qing Luo's suggestion, they should be handed over to a young lass like Miao Yi to deal with. This was truly a challenge to their authority as elders. But the current situation, no matter how uncomfortable the judging elder was, he had to nod his head in agreement. Actually, the way to prove it is very simple. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled up slightly as her eyes shone with a crafty glint. Don't you feel that? Yi was able to answer all the questions in the Sacred Maiden selection because she cheated? Why not we let you set the questions randomly? As long as it is related to witchcraft, you can ask. As she spoke, she glanced at the 3 candidates on the stage. Her slender fingers traced them and pointed at them one by one. Do you dare to accept it? The young girl's voice was very soft, but each and every word was like a heavy stone, heavily pounding on everyone's hearts. Miao Zhulian was so frightened that she stopped crying. Miao Xuedan's face turned slightly pale. She clenched her sleeves tightly, not daring to answer. Miao Yi's beautiful eyes, which had been emotionless all this time, finally showed some ripples. Miao Yi raised her eyes and met with Yi Qing Luo's resolute, smiling eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered. For no reason, her heart seemed to be covered by a warm current. Miao Yi closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she raised her red lips and spat out one word with determination. I dare. The judging elder was startled. He furrowed his white eyebrows and reminded her, Miss, you have to think this through. If you can't answer or answer the questions wrongly, you will really never be able to wash away the suspicion of cheating. I've thought it through. Miao Yi didn't hesitate at all as her tone was filled with determination. If I can't answer, I'm willing to accept punishment. Miao Yi's words ended. Chapter 2792. Miao Rongrong's henchmen and the rest looked at each other in dismay. They were feeling apprehensive and didn't give a reply for a long time. Yi Qing Luo didn't have much patience as she urged them impolitely. Why? You don't dare to come up with the questions personally? Those few people clenched their teeth as they clenched their fists. All right, not only us. Anyone present who has doubts can come up with the questions, as long as she can answer it. We believe that she didn't cheat. They didn't believe it. This trash Miao Yi could really answer all the knowledge related to venomous spells. They couldn't ask Miao Yi and the other Miao clansmen. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as her narrow eyes curved as she smiled at Miao Yi. Miao Yi nodded her head calmly, sure. Yi Qing Luo's smile deepened as she immediately shifted her gaze back onto those people. Between her brows, she was still smiling. But the feeling she gave off was totally different from when she faced Miao Yi earlier. Miao Rongrong's henchmen and the rest only felt that when that pair of smiling eyes fell onto them, it was as though they were covered with a thick layer of frost. Since you've agreed to this method to prove your innocence, then, that also means that you've agreed to the suggestion of severe punishment that I mentioned earlier. Yiqing Luo's lazy voice spoke softly. Miao Rongrong's henchmen and the others' expressions congealed as their expressions turned ugly. They wanted to reject, but on second thoughts, Miao Yi had to accept all the questions from the Miao clansmen who had doubts about her. Under such huge pressure, even if the current sacred maiden stood out, she didn't dare to pat her chest and guarantee that she could answer all the questions 100%. It was even more impossible for Miao Yi. Thinking in this way, the man with the rough voice sneered. Yes, we agree. Yiqing Luo smiled satisfactorily. Everyone present, please help to be a witness. As for me, I'll say the ugly words first. If Yi's innocence is proven and you go back on your words, then don't blame me for killing your Miao clansmen. The last 3 words. Yiqing Luo's bite was extremely heavy. There was a hint of coldness in his tone. The group of people trembled. The arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, and they had no choice but to release it. They stiffened their necks and forcefully endured. Yiqing Luo looked at the other 2 candidates on the stage. You guys, don't dare to accept the challenge? Why should I agree? I didn't cheat. Miao Julian's eyes were still red, and she was sobbing as she spoke. You didn't cheat, so I used this method to prove my innocence. Yiqing Luo said slowly. So, if you didn't cheat, why are you panicking? Miao Julian shrank back, as she had a natural fear towards Yiqing Luo. I accept the challenge. Miao Shiwudon, who had been standing in the corner, suddenly walked out. Her beautiful face was filled with elegance. Miao Julian's words were stuck in her throat. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she smiled and nodded her head. Miao Shiwudon was quite smart. Miao Julian was filled with grievances and fear. In this uneasy mood, he had no choice but to agree to prove his innocence with Miao Yi and the others. After all, Miao Shiwudon had accepted the challenge. If she continued to reject it, then she would be bearing the name of cheating. Even if she had 100 mouths, she probably wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. Chapter 2793. Yiqing Luo pointed at Miao Shiwudon. Express to Yi that you suspect her apologies. Yiqing Luo's finger moved and pointed at Miao Julian. Run 3 rounds around the Miao tribe and shout, I'm a waste at the same time. Based on what? Miao Julian's eyes turned red as she howled angrily. Yiqing Luo's smile turned chilly as her eyes shot out a chilly glint. Miss Miao Julian, didn't you keep saying that E is a waste? Are you afraid that your answer rate is lower than E? Miao Julian's face flushed red as the anger in her chest surged. Who's afraid? Good. As long as her answer rate is higher than mine, then I'll run those 3 rounds. She gritted her teeth as her gaze turned sinister as she stared at Miao Yi. If Miao Yi loses, then the one who runs 3 rounds and shouts I'm a waste will be her. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Miao Yi. Miao Yi didn't hesitate as she spat out a word. All right. The few Miao tribe elders looked at Yiqing Luo's extremely confident look. Looking at the stage, Miao Yi's calm expression, their hearts couldn't help but started to beat faster. Were they really so confident that they could answer the questions raised by the tribesmen? That bunch of people were all Miao Rongrong's henchmen. Now that the situation was so tense, they would absolutely not give Miao Yi a chance to make a comeback. The questions raised were definitely tricky and sharp. There was a possibility that even if it was them, they might not be able to answer it. How could these 2 young ladies display such calmness and confidence? It wasn't only the few elders who were curious. The guests who were crowding around were also filled with curiosity. From the barrage of gossips, the guests mostly understood some matters regarding Miao Yi, a young lady who had never come into contact with goo worms and sorcery. Could she really answer the questions raised by the Miao tribesmen regarding the sorcery? The judging elder looked at Yiqing Luo and Miao Yi and once again confirmed that the both of them weren't pretending to be calm. He cleared his throat and was about to speak. Suddenly, another female attendant walked up and handed over a piece of paper. The judging elder's expression changed as he swept his gaze around but didn't see that familiar figure. Since he was at the scene, why do you have to keep hiding? The judging elder criticized in his mind as he followed the requirements on the letter and loudly said, "Due to time constraints, we can only give the people of our tribe a chance to ask 10 questions. Only 10 questions? Meow Rongrong's henchmen were immediately displeased. How is 10 questions enough? There are so many voodoo spells, and there are also other people who want to ask questions. Meow Yang, this is to prove that Miss Meow didn't cheat. That's why there's a Q&A session. It's not for you to test Miss Meow." The judging elder's tone darkened as he looked coldly at the leader of the group. "Miss Meow is a candidate for the Holy Maiden. You'd better watch your attitude." The man called Meow Yang was immediately silenced by the elder judge's rebuttal and did not dare to refute. 10 questions it is. As long as Meow Yi couldn't answer a single question, Meow Yi would never be able to wash away her disdain for cheating. Both sides had no objections to this condition. The judging elder presided over this segment and allowed them to start asking questions. After scamming those people who had nothing better to do, Yiqing Luo continued to lie lazily back into Mo Xian's arms, calmly waiting for the outcome. Chapter 2794. I believe that everyone who works hard for their dreams will have the confidence to do their best. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up as she placed her chin on his chest. Her charming eyes were filled with brilliance. She had never been someone who was willing to be mediocre. Deep in her bones is the direct bloodline of the Miao tribe. Her smile, in between the words, softened by a few degrees. Even if Miao Rongrong does not give her any chance to touch the goo worm, she will also create an opportunity. And she paused and laughed hoarsely. She is the master that the ancient Goo King has acknowledged. How could she not be able to do such a simple thing? The big palm on her waist suddenly tightened. The man lowered his head and gently blew a breath of air into her ear. It made Yiqing Luo's petite body tremble. There was a feeling of numbness like an electric shock. The young lady's reaction pleased Mo Xian. The man gave a low laugh. His voice was deep and languid. "If it was you, for the thing that you are pursuing, can you do it to such an extent?" Yiqing Luo's ears turned red. Her cheeks were hot, like a fire burning. Listening to the man's low, hoarse voice, exuding a hormonal aura that seduced her all the time. Beside her ear, the man's low laughter became more and more captivating. Yiqing Luo's heart almost rippled to the sky. Her 5 fingers unconsciously curled, not willing herself, so easily controlled by the man. She took a deep breath. Her hands suddenly wrapped tightly around Mo Xian's waist. Her little head smashed hard against his chest. Immediately, she raised her head and looked at his eyes seriously. Under the golden mask, those 2 shimmering peach blossom eyes were very deep, with a trace of dark and unknown complex luster. This man, no matter what temperament, the kind of peerless elegance made one's mind ripple. Yiqing Luo's pink lips moved, word by word, clearly enunciated. "After all, I'm the woman that the Overlord has taken a fancy to. If it is for you, I can do anything." Her voice was very light and very gentle. Between her brows, there was a slight smile. The few people around couldn't help but shiver. One by one, they moved a few places away with an unbearable expression. "Have you ever considered our feelings when you're doing this? My eyes are about to be blinded. You've gone too far." Xiao Jin, Peach, and the others tried to ease the atmosphere as they joked around. However, the lovey-dovey couple remained motionless as they stared at each other. Mo Xian's deep pupils locked onto her face without blinking. For a long time, his eyes were expressionless as he pushed her away. There wasn't even the slightest bit of joy from the girl's confession. It was as if it couldn't even cause a ripple in his heart. Very cold. The few people who were making a ruckus around them fell silent. Instantly, the atmosphere became cold and oppressive. But the Yiqing Luo who was pushed away didn't reveal any sad or unhappy expression. Instead, She calmly tidied up her messy clothes and spontaneously leaned against DMO Xian. DMO Xian did not move. He didn't reject her approach. Yiqing Luo didn't move as her vision fell onto Miao Yi, who was on the selection stage. Soon, the Saintess selection would end. Xian would be able to return to normal. Yiqing Luo quietened down, but DMO Xian had no way to be quiet. Chapter 2795. The girl didn't continue to tease him. He was not used to it. The girl's words just now. It hit the softest part of his heart. He couldn't control this strange emotion. The only thought in his mind was, push her away. The rejection gave him a strange feeling in his heart. However, the moment he pushed the girl away, there was an extremely uncomfortable feeling in his heart. It was constantly fighting against another emotion that came out of his heart. It made him unable to control himself. What the hell was going on? Why, as long as this girl was by his side, why did he always have this strange emotion? On the selection stage, the 10-question segment was already in full swing. Because the elders of the judging panel only gave them 10 chances to ask questions, Miao Rongrong and the others naturally wouldn't ask questions easily. Instead, they racked their brains to think of the most obscure and difficult questions about Gu. Until now, that group of people had only asked 3 questions. The 3 Saintesses answered by rushing to answer. Those 3 questions were about the cultivation of many forbidden Gu, as well as the cultivation of forbidden Gu worms and the methods to cure them. Miao Xuedan and Miao Zhilian didn't have the chance to answer. Even though they were familiar with all kinds of books about Gu worms and Gu since they were young, they couldn't answer these questions accurately. Because the Miao tribe was the most taboo everything about Gu. They were absolutely not allowed to touch any forbidden Gu techniques or Gu worms. Just like the forbidden place of the Miao tribe, no one dared to step into it for hundreds of years. Therefore, when Miao Rongrong's party asked questions about Gu worms, and so on, the 2 of them were completely dumbfounded. They didn't know, not to mention Miao Yi. But when the first question came out, Miao Yi's expression didn't change, and her answer was flawless. Everyone's expression changed slightly. The second question, Miao Yi still answered flawlessly. The way everyone looked at Miao Yi changed. The third question, Miao Yi answered calmly again, flawlessly. At this moment, not only Miao Rongrong's party was shocked, but the elders of the judging panel were also shocked. 3 questions had been asked. There were only 7 chances left. Miao Rongrong's henchmen were already panicking. Miao Yang's face was ashen. He gritted his teeth and glared at Miao Yi, his voice trembling. No, this is impossible. How? How do you know so many forbidden Gu techniques and Gu worms of the Miao tribe? Where did you learn it? As he finished speaking, Miao Yang seemed to have found a breakthrough point. His eyes widened abruptly. I know. Did you secretly learn the Miao tribe's forbidden venomous spell? He became a witchcraft master? Like I said, how could a useless person like you have such a thorough understanding of the Miao tribe's Gu poison in such a short period of time? Miao Yang's words caused the expressions of the Miao clansmen to change. They all looked at Miao Yi. He tried to find some clues from Miao Yi. Once the taboo Miao Gu was involved to the Miao tribe, that person was a Gu master. If Miao Yi became a Wu Gu master, then he would have to accept the Miao tribe's punishment of burning him to the heavens. On the selection stage, the girl who was the center of everyone's attention slowly revealed a disdainful smile on her young and pretty face. Her pair of spirited eyes slowly swept across the crowd below the stage. Finally, it landed on Miao Yang. Chapter 2796. Senior Miao Yang is slandering me for cheating, and now he's slandering me as a witchcraft master? The girl was still laughing, but in her laughter, there were other emotions mixed in. Clearly, the girl was smiling. However, as they watched, they felt a sense of heartache. They felt that the girl in front of them was just forcing herself to smile and remain calm in the face of so many doubts. The Miao tribesman's heart softened. thinking of how Miao Yang and the rest had determined that Miao Yi had cheated and all sorts of accusations. The Miao tribesmen were filled with guilt. That's right, they had slandered Miao Yi for cheating. Now, they were slandering Miao Yi for being a witchcraft master. A girl who was not even 15 was slandered for cheating in the Sanus election. It was equivalent to ruining the girl's life. Now, they were saying that the girl was a witchcraft master. Were they planning to use their anger to burn the girl as a witchcraft master and sacrifice her to heaven? It was too vicious. The Miao tribesmen were very clear how much damage these two slander could cause to a person or even a family. Miao Yang and the rest were obviously determined to kill Miao Yi. Indeed, since young, because of my so-called sister, I did not have the chance to come into contact with Miao Gu. Miao Yi enunciated each word slowly. Have you ever thought about why she is so wary of me? Miao Yi looked at the Miao tribesman, her lips curling into a self-deprecating smile. Because Miao Rongrong is afraid of my talent towards Miao Gu. She laughed softly. Her laughter was filled with coldness. As long as I come into contact with Miao Gu, no matter what kind of Gu technique it is, I can easily remember it in my mind, and also the method to cure it. Miao Yi's words were like a sudden clap of thunder, striking the Miao clansmen until they were tender on the inside and crispy on the outside. The elders of the Miao tribe stood up in disbelief and looked at Miao Yi. Miao Gu prodigy. Miao Yi was actually a rare Miao Gu prodigy. With such a prodigy, Miao Yixiong was actually buried. Miao Yang was clearly stunned by Miao Yi's words. He roared hysterically. Impossible. Why, you're lying. You want to mold yourself into a Miao Gu genius so that the elders will be biased towards you, right? Miao Yi was very calm in the face of Miao Yang's hoarse screams. She smiled and didn't respond to Miao Yang's words. The Miao clansmen and elders naturally chose to believe in Miao Yi. Miao Yi definitely did not have the guts to fake Miao Gu's innate talent in front of everyone. After all, it would only take a few days of observation to determine whether a Miao Gu was a genius or not. Poochie, a chuckle leisurely rippled over the square. It also suppressed Miao Yang's hoarse screams. Everyone turned to the source of the voice. The red-clothed girl in the first row of the guest seats giggled and said, "Aren't you going to ask a question to prove your innocence? What's the point of talking about other meaningless things?" Yiqing Luo indifferently raised her brows as her long and narrow eyes were filled with impatience. Miao Gongzi has been slandering Yi time and time again. Is it because you feel that? The Miao tribesmen are all fools. The elders are all fools, and the surrounding crowd are all fools? That you can incite as you wish? Her tone was very light and gentle, without the slightest fluctuation of emotions. Miao Yang and the others' faces immediately turned black. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.